wrong to say. I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through color glass, time rolls on enough to let me move on past. But every little now and then it creeps on back to shade my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be, for all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this March 12th, 2024. Tonight, we cover UFOs, aliens, alien hybrids, you name it, and we've got brand new guests to do it. It's going to be really fascinating because ever since the whole UFO disclosure and the hearing with Congress, I've been fascinated with this topic, and I've wanted to get some good guests on the show to talk about it. Tonight is that show. Don't miss it. Stay tuned. Well, hello, everybody. Once again, I'm your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, with my co-host, Jamie Wolf. How are you doing tonight, Jamie?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I am fantastic. It's been such a interesting week, I must say.
Especially for you.
Always for me. Essentially, those of you who've been watching the show for a while, at least in the last year and a half, ever since we've moved to the new location, which is truly out in the deep woods, I don't say that lightly, and we're kind of far from everything, and internet's really, really sketchy out this way. It gets very difficult, and we actually have a pretty good connection considering the location, but not the greatest for streaming, and so we've been having issues that every now and then, when I have to resolve an issue and I spend hours upon hours trying to fix the issue, I come to new conclusions about what's really going on. Okay, and I get help, and sometimes I'll call people and they'll give me different ideas. I am not a technician. I'm not a computer guy. I'm good with computers, but it's just not my area. Okay, so I prefer not to have to deal with them if I can get away with that. I'd rather other people do it, but I find that in many cases they don't do as good a job as I do, and you're going to see here in a moment, once again, this proved to be true. So one night I was working between the last show and this one, and the internet just went out on this computer. And it was wired in with Ethernet, and I'm like, what the hell's going on now? So I unplug it, and I try to go to Wi-Fi, and can't get Wi-Fi. But yet every other device in the house is connected to the internet just fine. And so I knew it wasn't the gateway. I knew it wasn't the internet connection. It had to have been something going on with the computer. So what I ended up doing was reinstalling the drivers for the Wi-Fi, and guess what? Wi-Fi pops back on, working great. But Wi-Fi is not great for streaming because it's a signal, right? And signals can be affected by different factors like electromagnetic disturbances. You could have weather, anything could cause a problem. Even another piece of technology can create a problem. So I like to be wired in. Well, it could not, for the life of the computer, find the Ethernet connection. It acted like it wasn't even there. It was plugged in. So I contact Dell support, which you pay for, by the way. This is an Alienware computer, and Dell owns it, so you go through Dell support, and you have to pay now for tech support. Back when I bought my first Dell, they did this for you. It was part of their appreciation for you being a customer. Well, we don't
at Dell.
Yeah, we don't appreciate customers anymore in corporate America. We just want your money. You know, that's just the mentality today. So what ended up happening was I paid $550 something to get reactivated with their tech support plan, which promises that if something goes wrong with your computer, they will replace everything if they can't fix it. Sounds great, right? On the surface, it sounds great. Well, what's not so great is when you finally get to talking to them and they're taking you through the various steps to troubleshoot your problem, you realize very quickly that they're not doing anything that you haven't already done 1,000 times before you decided that you needed to call them. So they're doing little tests, and they're running the scans, and they're checking for viruses, and they're like, plug in try a different Ethernet cable, plug it into a different port. It's like, man, I've done all these things, but if it's going to make,
reading down a checklist,
they are, and it's all the stuff I already know what to do. Okay, because it's basic troubleshooting, right? You don't need to be an expert in computers to know that these are the steps. So it's like, okay, if I got to go through this with you in order for you to get to the point in your troubleshooting diagram that we get to the stuff that actually is wrong. And I have suspected for a long time, with all of the occasional dropouts and remember that weird setting that I had to shut off and everything? I've suspected for a long time that the Ethernet cable or the Ethernet port had gone bad or faulty. At the same time that went faulty, or when I started to suspect it, the touchpad for this laptop no longer worked anymore. So I had to always use a mouse. Okay. And so I didn't connect the two, but I thought, well, maybe there's some kind of conflict or hardware problem, whatever. So I mentioned all this stuff, and he's like, no, I know what we need to do. Okay. What do we need to do? We need to restore your computer to factory settings. I said, okay. And what does that entail exactly? That would involve wiping the hard drive, wouldn't it? Yes, unfortunately, we'll have to do that. But we can back up everything, just not your programs and settings. I said, well, it's like the programs and settings that are important, because it took me a long time to come up with some of these settings, and I don't remember what I did anymore, and I don't want to go through those weeks of trying to figure that out again. So I said, that's not an acceptable solution. I said, I really do suspect that the hardware is faulty, and let's go ahead and test that. Well, I'm not allowed to test that until we wipe your hard drive. I said, well, that's just not going to happen. And I said, if that's your best answer to this problem, I said, then you can give me back my $550. And so I said, can I talk to a supervisor, someone that can escalate this so that we can get this taken care of correctly? And so he says he's going to do it. The guy says he's going to call back in an hour. He doesn't call back, calls back 24 hours later. Finally talked to this guy. He says no, and he says he was mistaken. That's not the proper procedure. He says, we need to test your hardware first. I said, oh, I thought so. I said, so when can we do that? And he said, I'll call you tomorrow. Well, tomorrow comes, he doesn't call. So at this point, I decide, I'm going to get a second opinion. So I contact an IT company who's really very expensive, by the way. It's a corporate IT company. I thought, hey, maybe I can just pay them some flat rate, and then we can get this problem resolved. So I tell him what it is, and he says, you know what? He says, well, first of all, he says, good on you for not letting them wipe your hard drive. That would not have been the right course of action. He said, that would be last resort. And he says, it probably wouldn't work. He says, just do this. Go and just get yourself an Ethernet adapter and plug it. It's plug and play. You can do your USB-C port, or you can do your USB 3 port. I said, well, I got 3 USB 3 ports and a USB-C. I said, sure, let's do it. It's open. Actually, the USB-C is open when I do Vestiges. So so I got both. $12 for each one. Plug it in, instant connection to the internet, and now my touchpad's working again. So,
who knew?
Yeah, problem solved. But we did an internet scan with this new piece of $12 hardware, and we have never had the stability that we have tonight. So this should be an extra clear, extra strong broadcast for all of you. And I really do hope that that you enjoy it, because this is going to be a good show. And I just want to also remind all of you that running this show is expensive, as you can see. All right. This IT company charges $600 a month for their IT support, which is actually pretty good. But, you know, we don't have the ability to pay $600 a month in this church. Because if we did that, then we couldn't give you this show. And it would be pointless to have them in at that point. It's kind of like it catch-22. So if you find what we do here enjoyable to you, if you find value in this work, remember, the church pays for this itself. Have you noticed on YouTube, there are no commercials? We do not monetize this channel. Okay. The only part of this show that's monetized is the audio only, and that's to pay for the bandwidth on audio so that they can store the archives there. That's the only reason that we have commercials at all over there. And it doesn't even cover it. It covers maybe 25% of that cost, those ads. So this is mostly church, and which means, you know, we need you to help support the work that we do. The moderators out there are wonderful moderators. I think we've got Brandon out there. We've got Moosh, who's Val, Father Chris, and Tracy's out there somewhere. They help not only to keep the various platforms and the chat rooms all over the various platforms, because we're live streaming everywhere tonight. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on obviously YouTube and Spreaker, we're on Twitch and Instagram. They're keeping the chat safe. All right. They're getting your questions. If you have questions, they're going to bring them to our attention so that we can ask them of our guests tonight, or you can ask us right now in this first segment when we take questions. And, you know, they do a lot, and they're also they're going to put a donation message out there in the various chats. Please click that link and give a donation, preferably a monthly pledge if you wouldn't mind, because the church needs consistent money coming in to formulate its budget going forward, and this show is a big part of that expense. Okay, so very important that you remember to do that. This is not free. It might be free to you to watch, but it's not free to us to bring it to you. Always remember that. All right, well, tonight we've got Father Chris from Australia. How you doing tonight, Father?
Hey, Father.
Yeah, I'm pretty good. People might notice that my beard is missing.
Oh, yeah, we noticed all right.
Did it fall off? What happened?
Yeah, it fell off. Yeah. No, it's a far more boring story. I had an ingrowing hair, and I kind of tried to get around it, but it just looked stupid. So I thought, well, I'm gonna have to just do a reset. So it's
start over again.
Back.
It doesn't take long.
Control Alt deleted his face.
It doesn't take long to get it back. But no.
So I generally end up having to take it off about once a year.
I find right
it does no harm
here
to your skin to let it breathe.
This part right here, and I haven't shaved in a couple of days, so it's actually starting to get a little itchy. This part right here gets so itchy, and when I had my full-on Orthodox beard that Tracy hated with a passion, and it was getting pretty long and straggly, it was at a point where it's like, okay, I don't know if I can take this anymore. So I did chop it a few times just to kind of do a reset, as you said. But eventually, I just did away with it altogether because Tracy couldn't stand it. She finds it itchy. You know, she doesn't like me. She won't come near me with it. So it's like, well, that's a deal breaker for me. So it's time to go back to.
Well, Jen is the opposite. She, when I walked in the room, she went, "Oh my God."
What did you do?
So she said, "You look too soft." So yeah, I was tempted to say, actually, I tried soy milk for the first time and it fell off.
That's what did it.
That'll do it every time.
But no, so it's like I say, about once a year I end up kind of going like this, and my youngest daughter also is not a fan.
Not a fan.
No, I'm not a fan either. You gotta grow the beard back.
You do look good. A beard looks good on you. I think some people can.
Yeah, it's coming back.
A lot of people say I look better with a beard. I mean, you can go look at the pictures on the church website. There's pictures of me back in my Orthodox days. You can tell me.
It's quite impressive. You grow your mine will carry on growing, but it doesn't look like that.
It doesn't look like that. Yeah.
We just need to get you some beard oil and beard soap and stuff that they
Oh,
have
talk to
nowadays.
Tracy. Talk to Tracy, see if you can talk her into it. We got Brandon out there in Tennessee. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing pretty good. I don't have the issues you do, and I don't have the issues that you do, Father Chris. So I'm pretty good.
Well, your beard fell off a long time ago, right?
He may still be trying to grow one for the first time. He's a youngin.
No, every 2 days I have to shave because I hate it.
You can't stand it. Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I don't. I mean, I get used to it after a while, but there's that period between. Well, when you pass like maybe 3 or 4 days when you would normally be like, okay, it's time to shave, even if you've been like lazy on vacation or something. I'm very lazy with it because my facial skin's very sensitive. So I try not to shave more than every 3 days if I can get away with it. And so it reaches a point where after about 3 or 4 days after that, then it starts to get into this extremely itchy point. If you can get past that, which takes I find about a week and a half to 2 weeks, then I'm back to normal with it and I get used to it. But anyway, we'll see. I don't know. I don't think Tracy wants it back, so it might not happen. But I do think I agree. I can see where people think I look better with a beard. So I mean, I think most men do. Honestly, we're probably made for it, which is why we have them, right?
Well, there's an old saying, that if your dad doesn't have a beard, you've got 2 months.
All right, let's get started with questions from the ether. What's our first one for tonight, Brandon?
So the first question comes from Jay from the network. She asks, where does God come from? I know everything comes from God, but where does he come from?
Well, this is a linear being asking a linear question, which is why this is such a hard question to answer, because non-linear beings, things that exist outside of time, don't have to come from anywhere. When you're outside of time, you've always been and you always will be. The idea that something has to come from something is strictly a linear problem, which is actually not the natural condition of this universe. This is part of the fallen universe that creates that. That's all of the effect of entropy on what is otherwise a permanent, perfect creation. So the interesting thing is that time is actually part of the problem. Time is the vehicle through which death manifests itself. Time was never intended to be an issue. We made it an issue. Okay. So when you say, where does God come from? You're implying that God, there was a past. There is no past to God. It's not as though there was something that came before, because there is no before when you're outside of time. So you can't even ask that question because the question doesn't make sense outside of linear time. And you're talking about a concept that is absolutely outside of linear time. And incidentally, this is why we struggle with the idea of death, not just from a vantage point of pain and suffering, but out of just the idea of no longer existing. That's terrifying to a lot of people. And the reason that it's terrifying, or at the very least, even if it's not terrifying to you, it's probably mind-boggling to you. It's probably very difficult to conceive of no longer existing. Okay? And the reason that you have that proclivity is because you know innately that you weren't made to never exist. You were made to always exist. And that's actually the whole point of the Christian story. That's the whole point of salvation. Salvation is to bring you back to that perfect condition outside of time where there is no beginning and there is no end. And God is part of that perfect eternal reality. So God came from nothing because there was nothing to come from, because there is no past. There's no past to God. There's only the eternal now. And so that's the only way to answer the question. That's why God has no origin.
There's a symbol of this in the gospel as well. So, when Jesus hears that Lazarus has died, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept, and it's that that death is so alien a concept to God, so foreign a concept to God, because. Yeah, human death is concerned with linear time, and he came from from beyond time. I mean, this by way of a sort of a similar problem faces scientists, right? So because it's almost the same question as how does something come from nothing? And so, you know, you don't, in other words, you don't escape this problem if you just say, oh, well, there can't be a God then. You know, if we can't figure out how God was created, then we can't believe in God. Well, actually, you know, you first got to ask the question, how does something come from nothing? And, you know, I mean, again, to use classical Christian theological language, that's why we call God the Father the uncaused cause. You know, so there is no cause of God the Father.
Because you don't need one.
He simply is.
Outside of time, there is no such thing as coming of something before now. And there's no such thing as something after now. There is always just now. And that's the eternal perfection of both time and space. Because really, like I said, time is an accident. Time shouldn't be here. Time was created in the fracture of the fallen universe as part of the fallen condition. That's that's how death happened. Okay. Death is the natural consequence of time, but when you exist outside time, you don't have that issue. So that's the only way to answer the question. If there's no follow-up, Brandon.
It's also though, this is what makes sense of the Mass. I mean, you know, again, I know we've got a lot of Protestant listeners who may be baffled by this kind of obsession with the Mass that Catholics have.
Yeah.
It's because, in a sense, God exists outside of time, which also means that all time is present in God now.
Correct.
By saying that God is now, it's to say the same thing, that all time and all eternity is present in God now.
No.
That God's nature is simply being. It's why in the Old Testament, you know, he says, "I am who is." When Moses asks him his name, I just am. I am. You know. In other words, you know what God is, what he does, how he's formed is all perfectly simple. It's all contained in the one, and in the Mass, through that participation in the eternal glory of God, that's how we can be transported to the foot of the cross. So for a Catholic, at the Mass, we're always on Good Friday. We're always at the foot of the cross.
Yeah.
Whereas I think for Protestants, you know, they're very much on Monday, Thursday. They're this, you know, playing the part of what Jesus, will do this, you know, that he did on the Thursday night before his crucifixion. But for Catholics, we have this, well, not this idea. We understand the revelation that God exists with all time present to him and outside of time, and therefore at the Mass we are participating not in the crucifixion of Jesus, which is a slur, but
the present
in the one and the same
the
crucifixion
one that was always there,
the one that's eternally happening.
Yeah, because it always did. I mean, even though Jesus exists in time, his human nature exists in time. His divine nature was outside of time. That's, I think, really, if we want to get into the metaphysics of Christology, I think that's how you can explain it. How could you have one? How could Jesus have two natures? How could he be 100% God and 100% man at the same time? How is that even possible? It's not even mathematically possible. And I think the reason it's not, the reason it exists outside of the mathematics is that one exists in time. So the 100% in time is the man, and the part that's outside of time is the 100% God, and they coexist in that, in the personhood of Jesus Christ. But you know, I guess that's getting a little bit beyond this question. But Brandon, is that complete?
But it's why you wept. That's why you wept, because you know, the humanity of Jesus could barely comprehend it.
Correct.
Even though the eternal nature of Jesus knew that Lazarus's consolation was, you know, eternally guaranteed.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and it's why, you know, I don't like it when Christians can often respond to death of a loved one by saying, "Oh, it's all glory." You know, so, you know, no, there's sadness in death because it's so. It's a reflection of the fallen world and the one that we're not made for. We're made for the perfect the perfection that comes with heaven, and so we should grieve when people die. We should deny grief, but we don't grieve without hope.
Well said. Does that answer the question to your satisfaction, Brandon? I know it's not your question, but
So with this question, it's kind of really hard to answer because you can't give a linear answer to a linear.
right, they're not compatible.
Answer.
They're not compatible. The question is not compatible with the answer. So
Well, this
therefore,
is us. Everything in us. Everything ruled by time. This is God.
yeah,
That's
God is everything else.
yes.
Would be
God is
the-
everything
yeah,
around us.
Yeah, everything else. So
Hence why the incarnation is the central important claim of Christianity, because God bridges that divide by becoming man.
because he can.
You know, we can, because he's seeking us. You know, we can't actually find our way to God. God finds us.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the reason that it's actually not a possible question, because you're basically asking gibberish. I mean, the question is gibberish to the answer, and vice versa. The answer is gibberish to the question. They're not in the same reality. You're asking. That question asks has an answer that belongs to another universe for all intents and purposes. It's the questions in one universe, the answers in another. So they're not able to be. They're not able to coexist in that sense. That's what makes God, and again, getting back to Jesus, makes him so unique and special, is that he's the only thing that can coexist in both realities. So there you go.
A far more important question than that, though, is a concern in the chat on YouTube that there's no liturgical libations tonight.
Yeah, I
They're
just
wondering
I
what's
think
happening.
We got so sidetracked by
we were sidetracked
yeah.
doing the sound checks and everything.
There is a bottle over there, but I mean, I think part of the issue is that we've showcased everything that's currently open. So we'd be repeating at this point, and I don't want to open anything new until
we may have some new ones next week. We'll see how tomorrow
we're
goes.
probably going to do a bottle of champagne next week. I
Yeah,
think
I
because
think that'd be good.
we're supposed to be closing on the new property tomorrow. So we'll probably celebrate with all of you once that's all finalized and done. So that's supposed to happen tomorrow, unless there's some last minute thing. But we haven't heard anything, so I think we're good to go.
We're good to go.
Okay, good deal.
Yeah, actually, been texting with the realtor.
Oh, good. So we're good to go. So after tomorrow, we should have the property, and then I'll probably take you through on Thursday or Friday with the stream to see it. Just watch the YouTube. I'll probably simulcast it to YouTube and Facebook. Okay. And then you can see what the property looks like, and I can show you the different rooms and what they will be used for. And this is going to be on probably Thursday or Friday, I think. I just want to give a shout out to our viewers right now, because we're simulcasting, and we're finally, for the first time, we've got 88, actually we had 89 viewers live. That's a record for this
live.
show,
Yep.
I think, because honestly, live is not where most of our audience finds us. Most of the people that listen, which are in the thousands, are on demand.
We haven't even gotten to meet yet.
I know, right? So thank you all for joining us and spending the night with us here this Tuesday. We really appreciate it. And get the word out and make sure you like and subscribe, okay? Particularly on YouTube. That's where we need most of the visibility. But anywhere you're watching, thank you, and make sure that you give a like. All right, Brandon, what's our next question?
So we have a similar theme. If we refer to God as He, because He's essentially the creative principle, then is there a being that we call she that is aligned with the reabsorption principle?
In Christianity, that would be Hagia Sophia, okay? Because that is holy wisdom, okay? That is the sort of, in a sense, the female aspect of God, the divine feminine for Christian purposes. It isn't a it isn't it isn't like a fourth person of the Holy Trinity. I don't want to give that kind of like where it's like a holy quartet or
Your
something.
students understand.
but the fact of the matter is, there is a feminine aspect to God that is absolutely represented in Holy Wisdom. In the Orthodox Church, she is portrayed in iconography. No, there's not one here. It's there might be one.
You got one in the chapel.
Look around. There might be one. I don't think there's one on here though. And the other aspect here is that, remember, when the Ark of the Covenant would be carried around, there would be a sort of presence that would rise up like smoke, and it was referred to as the Shekinah. That is actually a feminine word as well, and it is sort of, in a way, a precursor to the understanding of the Holy Spirit, which also has a sort of feminine characteristic to it. We would still use the word he, but that's just to keep the unity, the universality of God in that context. There's some metaphysics involved there that is beyond the scope of that question that we could get to maybe next week on Open Lines, Open Topics if you want more on this. But I would say that is absolutely the balance in the divine feminine. Now, I will say why this seems shocking to a lot of people when they hear about this is that it is true that the divine feminine was suppressed in Christianity. Not all maliciously. It wasn't just because those damn patriarchs are at it again trying to suppress women. It wasn't really that. It was a little bit of that, but it wasn't really all that. It had a lot also just to do with, again, the metaphysical nature of how the divine masculine and the divine feminine operate. The divine masculine is the creative principle, and God is the foundation to creation. So therefore, it wouldn't have even been esoterically appropriate to refer to God as anything less than male, because that's how the esoteric principles at work in the theology would have understood God. Now, the divine, you might say, well, then what's the divine feminine do? Well, that's the sustaining principle. Okay, as well as what we refer to in esoteric mysticism as the reabsorption principle. Things come into being, things fall out of being. So there's the active and passive, the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang, the ones and zeros of binary code. We're all very familiar with this. We even have it in our own bodies with bilateral symmetry. The two hemispheres of the brain, for goodness sake. The left brain being very, very concrete and very analytical and logical, where the right brain is the creative and the more ethereal. It's not a competition. Okay, it's not that men are better than women, and it's better to be a man than it's better to be better to be a boy than it is to be a girl. This is just human bullshit that creates these kinds of problems with it. But it is a perfect symbiosis, and it does indeed exist in how God manifests, not in his nature, though. Not in his nature. These are manifestations of God, okay, which is very, very different. So God's nature is really not either. I mean, you're not dealing with God's not a man any more than he's a woman, okay? He is really just again, a recognition of this divine creative principle through the manifestation of creation, which is only one of the few ways that God can interact with us. He interacts with us through creation. And so therefore, one of his manifestations is a masculine manifestation. Okay. The feminine manifestation is his wisdom, but they're not people. All right. It's not deities. We're not, Hagia Sophia is not a deity. It's a aspect of God's manifestation.
One of the reasons that the church moved away from, female description of God was partly to deal with paganism, which had very much goddess worship, or the divine feminine played a role that was theologically incompatible with Christianity. But there are at least two other feminine principles One is that Jesus calls himself the mother hen in Matthew's gospel, I think, calling the chickens home. And so, to suggest, because of course God does become a man in Christ Jesus. But I mean, what you were talking about when you said God's neither, male nor female, you mean, the principle of God the Father, right? And so,
in the whole,ness, I mean, in the wholeness of God, yes.
Yeah. No,
because the Holy Spirit's not really a female either. I mean, even though it's referred to in the feminine, it is not a female. And Jesus is the only part of God that you could say is truly masculine, truly male, because that's part of the physical incarnation. But then again,
there's two others as well.
He couldn't have really been as successful, I don't think, as a woman in the mission he had to accomplish in ancient Judea.
That's true, but I think it's more than just context. I think that God becomes a man, not a woman, for multiple reasons. You're right. Context. If it incarnated as a woman, he would have had no voice. But then, he could have incarnated himself in 2024 when that was not the case. So there's more to it than that. But there are two other principles. One, of course, is the Blessed Virgin Mary, who is very much a feminine principle in the church.
And kind of almost an expression of Hagia Sophia too.
I think that's true. And they certainly get merged. And if you look at iconography of the Blessed Virgin Mary and, as that Panahia, is very, very connected. And then the other one, of course, is the church.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because the church is
the bride of Christ.
Is the bride of Christ,
right.
And it's we refer to ships, we refer to the church as the feminine, because of course the church is the ship of faith. It's the ark, and so there are loads of feminine principles in Christianity.
Absolutely, that's a good one. I like that one because the church is the passive principle. We're to follow God's will, and He leads us. He's the active principle. And, it does work. It fits perfectly. But I agree. I think that for the church to create a distinction from the paganism that they were inundated with, they were going to distance themselves from a lot of those semantics. And it would not have served, I think, the intention that they had to teach the gospel in the way that they felt it needed to be taught, for them to indulge too closely in these kinds of esoteric thoughts. And I think those that really wanted to dive into those arenas could do so privately. It's there. The information is there. The theology is there. It's just not the focus of what is publicly taught, because it kind of can be confusing. And it's best left, I think, to those who want to dive in deep enough and are capable of handling it when they do. So there you go, Brent.
Because also the central mission of the church is to proclaim the incarnation of Christ, that he died on the cross and rose again. That's the core business of the church. Mm-hmm. And so that's why a lot of people might be saying, why doesn't our church talk about the things we talk about on this show? Well, because you can watch this show. But the main reason that your church is there is in fact to proclaim those things.
Correct.
So in a sense, if they're doing that, then they're fulfilling the mission. They're keeping their promises. They're doing what they should do. But you also have a brain and access to information. So there are other places you can source that.
That's exactly right. Okay, what's our next one, Brandon?
So the final question comes from Paula. She asks, "Is a apostolic pardon the same as last rites?"
No, it's a part of last rites, but it's not last rites in and of itself. It's a component of it. It's I think, a very important component. But no, it is not last rites. Last rites is, it's kind of a combined sacramental action when somebody is terminally ill or when death is imminent. Okay, it includes the anointing of the sick, unction, or in this case, referred to as extreme unction, where they receive the sacrament of the sick, might be their last time, and this is to spiritually strengthen them, and to help expedite the process of dying, so that it isn't as uncomfortable as it otherwise would need to be. You would be surprised how many times I have seen where we have been in a situation where last rites was administered and the person dies within minutes or at most an hour after they receive it. So that's the first part. Usually if the person is conscious, then there would be a confession heard around this time, which is the second sacrament that makes up the process of last rites. And there is an apostolic part in there. Of course, the third sacrament is viaticum, which is probably their last Eucharist, or what could be their last Eucharist. Not necessarily, but it's set up in case it is that they receive the Eucharist one last time. But during the absolution parts, there is a component that can be added that is called the apostolic pardon. And what it does, I'm going to read you the exact words. I keep it on my phone in case I'm ever on the highway and I see an accident where a person's dying. I can go up and I can give the apostolic, because it's not something I've committed to memory. I almost never have to use it, right? But it is through the holy mysteries of our redemption. May Almighty God release you from all punishments in this life and in the life to come. May He open to you the gates of paradise and welcome you to everlasting joy. So that is the words of the apostolic pardon, and that is used to, and again, it's a very Catholic answer, okay? So those of you who are not as familiar with Catholicism are going to be a little lost here, but what it does is it grants a plenary indulgence that essentially it mitigates any time, and where I'm using time in quotation marks because after the first question that we answered, this won't make as much sense now. But it mitigates.
It makes more sense because it shows how it deals with it.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
It does show how it deals. So it mitigates the time in purgatory. Okay, that the consequences from a Catholic vantage point, that the purification process that's involved. From the Catholic theological vantage point, this mitigates that effect. So what you're getting in last rites is all of those things. That's why rites is plural, because it's not just one thing. But it's the sacrament of the sick for strengthening, and sometimes miracles happen. People recover. Sometimes they do happen, and the sacrament is a vehicle through healing. That's why it's no longer. It used to be. This is okay. Like, well, I know we sometimes, Father Chris, you and I can be a little critical of the Vatican II era, but one thing I think it did very well was bringing the sacrament of the sick back to people who weren't dying, and it should have always been that way because that is biblical. Back in the pre-Vatican II days, you had to literally be on death's door to receive it. Now it is open to anyone who has a physical, spiritual, or mental ailment of some kind. You can receive this, and there can be healing or grace that's imparted, or sometimes both. Okay, and so it's just a way to complete the whole process. Viaticum being the last time one receives the Eucharist, and then absolution, which involves the plenary indulgence, which you can get from other ways. You're like, well, boy, why does it have to be when I'm dying when I get that? Well, there's plenty of plenary indulgences out there. Some of them are really easy to get. So if you're really interested in this and you understand, if the Catholic faith is something that appeals to you, connect to us and I can show you how to get a plenary indulgence without an apostolic pardon.
Just to reassure the Protestants that are listening, a plenary indulgence is only valid if you have true contrition.
Correct.
So for the Protestants listening, people have to really be sorry.
Yep, you can't just get it because it's a get out of jail free card. It's not a get out of jail. Even absolution itself. Look, sometimes I've heard Protestants criticize Catholics for confession being like, well, you can just do anything wrong and then just go to confession, and then
it's not how it works.
It does not work like that. You have, in order to receive part of the proper form of the or probably the validity, I should say, of the sacrament of confession involves proper intent. Okay, and part of the proper intent is on the part of the recipient, which means that they have to truly resolve in that moment that they truly will make every effort and truly believe that they will never commit these acts again. If you can't be like, for example, a person, some hypocrite who, is cheating on his wife, repeatedly. And he's like, well, I got to go to confession now. And then knows that he's going to go back to one of his lovers tomorrow. That's not true contrition. That will not grant absolution. No matter how many times he goes to confession, he will not be absolved of that kind of sin under Catholic theology. So, no, it's a little bit more involved than some people make it out to be.
Over.
Yeah.
It also misses the point. It also misses the point that it's the purpose of the sacrament of reconciliation isn't to, dodge hell. It's to encourage you to live a Christian life, which is to truly live, which is to live as you ought to.
Yeah.
And so dodging hell it should be the least of your concerns. It's how can I be fully alive to serve God here and now, and all the things that tear me away from that are the things that I bring to the confessional, so that I can skip out of there and get on with the mission. That's the way to look at the sacrament of reconciliation.
That's exactly right. So I know we've still got quite a bit of time before we go to the break and start tonight's show, but that's all I have for you on that one. Do you have any other question that you wanted to get into tonight, Brandon?
I do. I come prepared.
I know you do.
So
Yep.
let's say easier question that you've been asked quite a bit, but if you could explain it again.
Yeah.
What does esoteric mean?
Okay, so esoteric, which is just to give the foundation here, okay? I practice esoteric Christianity, all right? It's not terribly different from conventional Christianity, outside of the fact that it takes everything that conventional Christianity understands and knows, and it takes it deeper. It goes further beneath the surface. So it's not just a superficial applying of theology. It's an in-depth immersion in theology. And this is where you get to some of those deeper realities that seem to shock people when we talk about them. Like the first question tonight, where did God come from? Well, it seems like a realistic question to ask, because you're like, well, how can something I've always been? That doesn't make sense. But when you understand, when you think of it from, pretend you're a writer for Star Trek, okay, and you're doing a time travel episode. If you don't exist in linear time, then that would mean that you would occupy all points in time, always and forever, and always have. And so you're asking a question that is a linear being in linear time, asking a linear question about something that is completely outside of linear time, is not a linear being, and is not subject to the deficits of being linear. Therefore, God doesn't need to have an origin, because anything outside of time has always been, by the nature of what that means metaphysically. Esotericism is where we get those kinds of conclusions. So esoteric is sort of it's not hidden and obscured. It's not like the word occult, which literally means secret. It's that which is not immediately apparent. So it's basically the information that is underneath the surface of what is already known. Okay, so think of it this way. If the conventional Christian theology is sort of the conscious mind, then esotericism is the subconscious. It's that which is operating beneath the surface. And so that's the realm in which we operate here. I think sometimes people see an esoteric Catholic church or an esoteric or a bishop that practices esoteric Christianity. They think we're occultists. It has nothing to do with the occult. It has everything to do with philosophy. All right. What it means is we take our philosophy further. And it's actually really good, because our guests tonight, when we get to the next segment, have a background in Tibetan Buddhism, which is my background too. And I've said on this show so many times before, Christianity only ever made sense to me after having become Buddhist. It did not make sense to me before. I could not relate to it until I had gone through Buddhism. So again, that's part of also the esoteric, because see, Buddhism is a very esoteric religion. Some would argue it's not even a religion. Some would say it's truly a way of life. It's not a belief system as much as it's a practice. It's something that you do, not something you believe in. And so the Eastern religions in general are far more esoteric. So esoteric Christianity attempts to take to Christianity that approach to religion, that approach that is more of the way of life, more of the deeper understanding. So that's what esotericism is. That's the way in which we apply it in this church. And that's what makes us, I think, different. And if you've looked at us, if you've watched this show before, and if you followed other things that we do, you might be confused, because you're like, you might watch the Mass on the YouTube channel and be like, well, this looks like every Catholic Mass I've ever been to.
Well, yeah.
And of course it is. We don't change anything just because, I mean, other than the fact that, we do have a little bit of East and West going on with the iconostasis. So there's a little bit of orthodoxy in our approach. And my theology is a little more orthodox, as Father Chris has pointed out. I am an annihilationist.
Design.
Yeah, I'm an annihilationist. And you know where my annihilationism actually comes from? That was Buddhism that helped me with that. The idea of anatta, of no soul. Okay. I had to figure out a way to reconcile that within myself. Is this a contradiction in religion, or is there something we're missing here? I was not willing to accept that there was a contradiction between what Buddhism teaches of there not being an intrinsic self, and Christianity that pretty much is obsessed with an intrinsic self. Because let's face it, the average Christian is not practicing because they want to find God as much as they're afraid of hell. And so, which is the worst reason for practicing a religion, by the way. If you're afraid of, if you're doing something to avoid fear, then you're doing your religion wrong. I hate to break it to you. That's
they want to tell everybody else that they're wrong.
That's the other. That's because that's also a fear response. That's also a fear
absolutely.
response. When you tell other people that they're wrong,
You're wrong, I'm right because I say so.
Because you're trying to justify your position because you're afraid. You can't deal with the idea of being wrong.
There is one thing worse than that, though.
What's that?
I mean, look, I agree with you. It's a terrible, fear of hell is a terrible reason to worship God. But it's better than not trying at all.
Because you can always hope that maybe
it's one rung up from.
You can always hope that maybe somewhere down the road, you'll come to a deeper understanding. Whereas if you are not doing it at all, then
you're an encounter.
Yes. So that I think might be the only saving grace that it has. But ultimately, I had to figure out a way to reconcile those two things. And so the way that I was able to do it is by understanding that actually what the Gospels teach is exactly the same thing. That there is no intrinsic self. Salvation makes one real, but they're not real yet. Okay. And Buddhism just doesn't get into the definition of what that means. It just refers to parinirvana, or it refers to it in this state of extinction. Right. But it doesn't really try to define really what that is. It's beyond definition, beyond words. Shunyata is a very elusive concept. It's nothing, but it's not like it's no thing, no objectivity ultimately, but there's still some reality to it that is incomprehensible, which sounds a lot like the beatific vision when you think about it. It sounds a lot like, esoteric concepts of heaven. And so that's how we apply it. That's what I do. And that's the nature of, I think, esoteric Christianity. It's able to step outside the box, whereas conventional Christianity gets punished for doing that by other people. You get accused of being a heretic. We read the Nag Hammadi. We're not afraid of Gnostic scriptures. We're not afraid of the Dhammapada. We're not afraid of
Enoch.
Enoch. We don't consider them necessarily canonical works from a authoritative standpoint.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we don't read them and find in philosophical value there, in the same way that a conventional Christian would look at the Didache and say, well, this is not inspired canon, but there's value here. What about all the writings of the saints? That's not canon, but there's value there. There's intrinsic value. And that's all we're doing is we're saying these are deep thoughts of people that have had a faith experience, had an encounter with something divine. Why would we cut ourselves off from it just because it doesn't reflect precisely the kind of thinking that we think we should have? You'd be surprised, Brandon. I think that most Protestants in your world out there in Tennessee would be shocked at just how non-objective the early Christians were. They were not concerned with getting every detail of theology correct. They were concerned with living the Christian life to the best of their ability and helping others to do the same. What was less important was trying to understand the nature of Christ. What was important was that Christ was available and he made his grace available, and others can be brought to that truth and enjoy the benefits of having that relationship. That's what mattered to them. It wasn't so much about, we got very technical as Christianity went on. And some of it was to refute obvious heresies, because the church did want to bring everybody on the same page. They felt that was necessary, and so they did so. But it really got bad. Honestly, I love Thomas Aquinas, but I think he gets far too technical to the point that no Orthodox priest I've ever known likes him. They find him interesting to read, but I don't think they really would say, well, let's refer to him for our theological position. They just find him to be too technical.
Go to St. Gregory the theologian. They say, if you think Thomas Aquinas is good, you should read St. Gregory the theologian.
Yes.
That's their standard.
That's their standard.
Which is not bad advice, by the way.
No, not at all. Not at all. It's actually fantastic. Okay, let's go ahead and take our break now. And when we come back, we will have brand new guests, Leslie and Stephen Shaw, to talk to you about UFOs and aliens and anything that's on your mind. You're going to find this show fascinating. Trust me. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the second part of Vestiges After Dark, as we are now getting ready to discuss UFOs and aliens with our brand new guests, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. I think you're going to find, again, this to be a fascinating discussion. Father Chris and Brandon Milam will be back on the third hour to engage in the conversation when you can call into the show if you want to, or we can take your questions directly from the chat rooms across the internet, whichever you feel more comfortable with. We're going to be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. It's going to be fun. Okay, are you ready for this? This is going to be something fascinating. I have been waiting for this for a long time. Like I said, ever since they did the, we had that whistleblower and everything else.
Disclosure.
I mean, I don't know if it was his disclosure as much as we wanted it to be.
Of course
not. But, it was, it's getting there. It's getting there. We'll talk about that. So our guests tonight are Leslie and Stephen Shaw, seasoned ufologists who merged their vast knowledge of ancient history, human evolution, and Tibetan Buddhism for inspiration in their groundbreaking book, Who They Are and What They're Up To. Both deeply passionate about ufology, Leslie, a former journalist, and Stephen, a polymath and with diverse expertise, including Chinese medicine and music, bring a unique perspective to the UFO phenomenon. With firsthand UFO experiences and a dedication to uncovering truths behind abductions, they aim to shed light on humanity's mysterious encounters with extraterrestrial beings. Let's welcome Leslie and Stephen Shaw to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Welcome. Uh-oh.
Leslie, can you hear us?
Chat is how you
There you
leave
are.
notes.
Okay.
Can you hear us?
Delco wants his notes on the far right too. All right.
Looks like we're having some
see
kind
the
of
chat.
sound. We can hear them, but they can't hear us.
They're trying to find their mic
Okay.
icon.
They're on,
Okay.
but they can't seem to hear us.
Gotta love tech.
Okay, Brandon,
Paul.
if you could go and see if you could help them figure out what their issue is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off I'm going to turn your microphone so you guys can talk, Brandon, and you can see if you can talk to them or try texting them, however you want, and see if you can connect them. I'm going to mute you so that we don't hear all that, and then let's see if we can get them on here, because we can hear them, but they can't seem to hear us, and I'm not understanding why that is, because you can hear me, right, Brandon?
Well,
Yeah.
he's not trying to reach us desperately on Instagram or something.
Okay, so go ahead and try to reach them, because they seem to be wondering why we're not reaching out to them. All right. Okay, so sorry,
here.
everybody. I don't know what's going on with that. Brandon will hopefully be able to get this resolved and fairly quickly, I hope.
Well, while we're waiting, you've had a few UFO experiences, which most of our listeners know about, but you want to try and touch on that while we're waiting?
Yes. I can. I wish I would like to get their feedback on it.
Maybe just an overview.
But I've had my own UFO experiences. One that I might not have talked about was actually before I don't remember this one, but my dad remembers this one, and we talked about it with him quite a bit growing up. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, somewhere around that time period, I think it was Peter Pan that we went to go see in theaters or at a drive-through. It was a drive-through. And I remember going to see it. I remember going to the drive-through for the first time, but I mean, it's a faded memory. It was at night.
Is drive-through Northeastern talk for drive-in?
A drive-in. Did I say drive-through? Yeah. Thank you. No, it's not Northeastern. It's just me being an idiot.
I mean, y'all talk different up there.
No, drive-in. Sorry, drive-in. Did I say drive-through? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
No, drive-in. And of course, it was after my bedtime. So after when we had the opportunity to go home, I fell asleep on the way home. And while we were driving home and I was asleep, my mom and dad were in the front, and my father noticed, if I recall the story correctly, he noticed some weird disturbance in the sky above us as we were driving home. And when we got home and pulled into the drive, this thing followed us.
Oh.
But he couldn't really make out what it was. Uh-huh. And it didn't have any lights that I recall him seeing. He just could tell there was like a disturbance in the sky that seemed to follow. And he's like, there's something up there, but I don't know what it is. And so he went and pulled over he got home and then he pulled into the drive, and instead of going, where he would park, he just stopped the car, got out and looked up, and above him was this massive, I think he said it was like the size of a football field, floating at a distance that he could throw a rock at it.
300 yards.
It was close enough he could throw a rock and hit it, and it made no noise. And it just sat there and watched him, and then it started off. And that was like the first encounter, I guess, where I was present, but I don't remember it because I was asleep. And that was kind of a changing point for him, because it was a story he talked a lot about. I mean, you don't forget something like that,
no,
right?
No, you don't. And you probably have to clean your shorts out when you witness something like that.
You would think so. So I don't know. We're going to try to bring them back on. Let's see if we've got this fixed here, because there must be some setting that's wrong. Brandon, have you had any success here?
So we're working on it.
Okay.
They did say
Can you hear us
that
now?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, ma'am.
We can hear. Do they know we can hear them, but they can't hear us for some reason?
Yes. They just said it keeps saying the host won't let you unmute.
Oh.
That is weird, because they are.
Bishop.
It is showing muted. Unmuted.
This problems will probably be resolved in your audio preferences.
Have them log.
Don't hear the ringtone.
Have them log out and have them log back in. Let's see if that fixes it.
When in doubt, log it out.
Yep.
The speaker and microphones. We're getting readout.
Let them know we can hear them fine, and they are unmuted. We can hear everything that they're saying. But this is just strange.
Well, goes with the subject, doesn't it?
I guess it does. But this is like the second time we've had an issue with a guest having a problem connecting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very strange.
Yeah, we can hear them just fine, but they cannot hear us. And I don't know why, because you can hear us.
Mics are working, obviously.
Yeah. It's something
Their
with their
equipment's
audio
working,
coming in.
There's got to be a setting.
He was saying in
Yeah.
our preferences. Audio settings. Here we go.
We're checking our audio settings now.
Okay,
Clear on
let's
that.
hope this works. They can't hear us. Brandon, you can transcribe it with text, because I'm looking at this and they are unmuted.
Had to be something in the profile or something.
They are unmuted, and as I look here,
Okay, I see it.
I can
hear you now.
you can hear us. Hey,
Yay!
okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm just not very technical, as you may have surmised.
You're a
Don't
pretty
worry
good
about
company.
it.
Don't worry about that.
This audience is so used to it because we've had so many issues over the various episodes with various things going wrong. So don't worry about it at all. We're just happy that you're here with us.
We can chalk it up to cosmic interference.
I think we
Yes,
can.
let's do that.
All right. Well, welcome to Vestiges. I'm so happy to have you here. I guess you couldn't hear anything that I did for your introduction, but you can go back and listen to it.
He did y'all good. He did
Later
y'all
we
good.
will.
That was fine.
So let's get started here tonight, because what prompted us looking for some experts, or at least people who are really capable of discussing on a deeper level what is happening out there in the skies and with government cover-ups and everything else, was with this disclosure thing that happened and some of the strangeness that occurred around that time. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, it almost seemed as if it was a taboo, forbidden subject. No mainstream media source would cover it. No government official would talk about it. There was always the occasional, nutty guy, usually from another country or something, that was long past retired, had some high-level security clearance at one point in his life, but maybe wrote a book or something, and it can be chalked up to him trying to sell books. So there was always like people out there wanting to talk about it, but it was always after the fact. Nobody in active service duty or anything like that until COVID happened. And around that time, then there had been, right before that time, there had been the first talk of disclosure, if you recall. Mm-hmm. And then COVID sort of took over the stories in the news, and no one went back to it again until...
Actually, the demarcation point was in 2017.
Yes, he mentioned that. Yes.
Yes,
Luis
Luis
Elizondo.
Elizondo,
Yeah.
head of ATIP, and he released he released 3 videos and his story to the New York Times.
Right.
And before that, you could mark that time as every time before that, the government would stonewall us and say it wasn't real. It's not real. It's swamp gas. It's your mass hysteria. It's weather balloons, or anything except.
As of last week, they've released their report from Arrow,
But before that though, before Luis Elizondo, they always lied about it. And then right when Luis Elizondo released his stuff, the DOD actually released a statement saying they're real. These are a real phenomenon. And then they lied again, saying they don't know what it is, because we know they know what it is, because they have crashed ships and the alien bodies, right?
Yeah.
But sorry, honey, you go ahead.
Yeah, well, but what I was going to say is that the Arrow, which took over from ATIP, they just came out last week, and with another report from the Pentagon saying that there is no such thing as aliens.
Yeah, they're going back to
They're going right back to where they were.
So it's like the herring did nothing, it seems, or did it?
Not really, because they're going back on their original story that they haven't been able to find anything credible as far as there being aliens. But it's also kind of in our book. They're actually not completely telling a lie, but it's in our book, and if we get around to it, we'll kind of explain why they're not completely telling a lie.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to know more about that, because that was the starting point for me, is that I've always felt there was something going on. I've had my own experiences. Okay. And maybe we can get into some of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on those. Sure. But, I've had my own experiences with the alien phenomenon and personal, and I'm not of the typical Christian perspective that seems to be pervading out there, where people think that they're demons. I don't believe that. I think it's more far-fetched than coming from other planets, in my opinion, or at least from another dimension, maybe. But I don't know.
I think the demon mythos may have come from the alien abduction phenomenon rather than the other way around. Because like the whole vampire mythos, right? They come in the night.
Yep.
They are very pale. They're very powerful. they can hypnotize you, they can paralyze you.
It's true.
And they take genetic material in the form of blood.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Time and time again.
And then in the succubus scenario, they take, or incubus scenario, they actually impregnate their victims. I'm sorry, the incubus, not the succubus. The incubus is the male one. Yeah,
Right.
sorry, I get them confused.
Yeah, it's easy to.
They impregnate, and then there's a sexual component to it as well. And you know, vampires are innately sexy, right?
Yes.
There's this
Oh, yeah.
sexiness about them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we
They
think the
seduce you.
mythos is the other way around. Is like the alien abduction phenomenon began thousands of years ago, and that's where we think the demon mythos comes from.
So unintentionally, it's like they didn't come here with the intent to create a mythos. It just sort of evolved out of people trying to make sense of what was happening to them.
Right. You know, imagine you're in the 1600s and it happens to you. And, you know, obviously
It would be a demon.
You know,
I mean, what else would there be? You didn't have a
wouldn't know
framework
what
for
it was,
anything
yeah.
else. Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying.
You're pregnant one day, and then all of a sudden you're not pregnant.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
you were a virgin and suddenly you're pregnant.
Well, there you go.
Because something raped you in the middle of the night or whatever. And
Sure.
and bizarre stories like that, you know.
Yeah. So let's, I guess, get started. I always like to ask new guests to the show how they got involved in this. And I think we already know a little bit about it from your bio that, you know, you kind of grew up in this stuff. So let's talk a little bit about how you came to where you are today, to the point that you're writing books about this content.
Do I start?
Yes, dear.
Yeah, it started with me when I was 3 years old. I would be visited in the middle of the night in my bed, and with this little playful being that would jump on my stomach and my chest. And it was not a cat. It was invisible. And it was several times it happened. And I didn't think too much of it. It was fun. It wasn't menacing at all. And to backtrack a little bit, I grew up in a family that came from wartime England, and their parents came from Germany. And so we had this entity called O'Glegly that was our family spirit guide, kind of protector, that would show up and take care of people or help people or protect people, and or maybe be there when they were dying. And so I grew up in a British family that went through the war.
They were a psychic
And
bunch, you know.
so,
They were all
it was one
automatic
of these
writers,
things-
right? You know?
Yeah, it was one of these things that I didn't talk with my friends at school about because they think I lived in a haunted house, or I was lying, or I was like just really, really weird.
Yeah.
So fast forwarding a bit, now I have my little brother Philip, and we have a bunk bed. So I was 10 years old. My brother was 6 years younger, so he was 4. And I was on the top bunk bed, and I heard this weird sound that I didn't recognize. Again, in the middle of the night, and I knew it wasn't a dog, because I know what the dog sounded like. So I got out of bed, and I was walking down the hall, and the hall kitchen light was on, so I could see where I was going. And I remember very clearly my heart was pounding, and I was breathing really kind of rapidly because I was actually fearful about what I was going to see. And as I got toward the end of the hall, I just black out. And the next thing I know is a few hours later, I'm back in my bunk bed, all tucked in again, and having no clue what happened in between. Now, my brother, for a number of years, between I think about the age of like 7 and 9, he slept in the closet in our room. And I asked Philip a few times, why are you sleeping in the closet? And he said, you know, I'm afraid of the little men that come at night.
Oh, wow.
And so he said that he saw these little guys that he described kind of like as almost like garden gnomes,
Sure.
kind of small. So he was like literally scared. And before he died, I asked him about his earlier life, and he just said, Stephen, I don't remember much of my early life. And this is the guy who taught calculus for fun at a college level.
He was a brilliant man.
So he was not a dummy by any stretch.
Yeah.
So
And these incidents tend to come in groups. Stephen had a big group of them when he was 8.
yeah, the whole family.
And then Philip, he had a group when he was 16.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons we started attributing it to the alien abduction phenomenon, first of all, there's this thing where they black out right at the end. And they're afraid, right? They're scared, or they see something totally bizarre and they're wondering what it could be. And then they black out. And you're not going to just fall asleep in that state of mind, right? You're not going to just drift off again. And then we learned that it's really the signature of the alien abduction phenomenon, where people have these blackouts and then big chunks of missing time. And Philip actually did see a gray alien in his room one time.
A tall gray.
Tall gray, the 6 foot size, the real slender, but the big eyes and the gray. And he said he saw it and then once again immediately blacked out. He had a cluster of 3 incidents all in 1 week, and it culminated with that one. He saw bright white lights shining in his room, and he woke up to them, and he was looking at them, wondering what they could be. And the next thing he knows, he blacks out.
They were outside his room, actually, outside.
Yeah, in the window. And then either the next night or a night after, he heard a scrabbling on the floor, and he reached down to pet what he thought was a cat, and a cold hand grabbed his arm instead, and again he blacked out.
Yeah, I'd probably black out too.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Yeah.
But then Stephen had this bizarre cluster of things happen at 18.
Yeah, Philip's happened one in 1982. Mine happened in 1979. My sister and my dad were also involved with this, and in addition to my mother and my brother. But they were living at a house that was 350 miles away, and a house that we were actually building ourselves, because my dad was a cabinet maker, and we were building our own house in Sonora, California. So, anyways, there was this week where it started out where my dad came in to breakfast in the morning, and he said, Stephen, my closet doors opened and closed on me during the night. And I kind of looked at him. I said, "Oh yeah, sure, Dad. You're just kind of joking with me, right?"
And then the next night,
the
3 of them heard his sister, he and his father heard a silver bell ringing inside the wall for about 15 minutes.
Yes, I just given him a book by Paramahansa Yogananda, Metaphysical Meditations, because I was very much into studying Tai Chi and also studying Paramahansa's work at that point in my life.
Sure.
And so I was reading it. I was really enjoying his little booklet there. And my dad came in about a half an hour later with this puzzled look. He said, "Stephen, I'm hearing this silver bell inside the wall by the chimney." And sure enough, there was a silver bell being rung. Got my sister, who didn't want to have anything to do with this stuff at that time in her life, and she said, "That's a silver bell." Well, the next morning we talked. Yeah, I know I tend to waffle on here.
How long is the show?
You've got another hour and a half, so you're good.
Okay, we're good then.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I thought so.
Tell the long version, right?
So it was our practice to call my mom the next day, just to say hi, because she was living in Sonora, California, and my brother was there. So she said, Jeffrey, who's my dad's name, said, the phone rang last night at 9:30, and Philip says the phone didn't ring, but I heard this bell sound, and I picked up the phone, and there was this man's voice, this deep voice that said something along the lines of, "I am the invisible Ambichi." And my brother swore up and get down that the phone never rang, but my mom heard this bell sound, and we thought that was really weird.
And we don't know what the Ambichi thing is.
Yeah, that's very bizarre, isn't it?
The next night I was sleeping in my regular bedroom, and I was awakened by a whizzing sound in the air called like a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. And I looked kind of down the hallway. The kitchen light was on, so I could kind of see down the hallway, but there was nothing there. So I thought, well, maybe I was dreaming or something. And then as I rolled on my left-hand side, I started to go back to sleep, and then the bed was pushed 2 distinct times from the foot of the bed, a push, kind of gentle. And living in Southern California, I thought, well, maybe it was like a little earthquake.
Sure.
Then it pushed again, a little stronger. And then I tried to ignore it, and then it pushed even stronger 2 times, each time 2 times. And by this time, I'm getting scared, and I'm getting scared and annoyed. Okay. And then I get 3 distinct taps on my shoulder, on the mid deltoid area, just below the shoulder blade. And just tap, 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 just like somebody's index finger. And at this point, I said, I've had enough of this. So I whirled around, and I just said, "What?" Because I was expecting to see something. I thought, is this the family spirit guide, or what is going on here? Is my dad playing a trick?
Yeah.
And there was nothing there. And once again, I black out.
But he felt that presence, you said right before.
Yeah, there was a presence there. I
couldn't see
couldn't see it with my human eyes. Okay, so I couldn't see it. Now, the next night, I wasn't going to sleep in that room, so I didn't sleep in that room. So what I did, I slept on the couch in the living room in my work clothes because I was a cabinet maker with my dad at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up about 5:30 in the morning. This is January, so it was dark. And I looked at my piano because I'm a musician, a lifelong musician. And I thought what I was going to play or compose that day. And I listened to the little fountain in the other room. So I was awake and, laying on my back very comfortably. And from behind me, from the front door, about 25 feet from behind me, this tall blue-white entity, about 6 to 7 feet tall, slender, came moving towards me upright, like it was walking but floating at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It took about a second and a half for it to reach my right-hand side. It brought with it intense blue-white light throughout the whole house. The house was just filled with blue-white light. And it stopped by my right side, and the whole right side of my body became paralyzed. Not in a scary way, but I just could not move it. And it bent down to the entity bent down to my right side and whispered in my ear. And I couldn't tell whether it was male or female, but it was
just made like a hissing kind of noise.
It was a friendly. It was like a whisper.
A whisper, though.
Like a whisper.
It was a very, very loud whisper. It wasn't in my head. It came from outside.
Okay.
Which is a difference. So it wasn't something telepathic. It was actually
an audible sound. Okay.
It was audible, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to see the family spirit guide, old Glegley, that I've heard about since being a kid, and I was like all excited about that. I wanted to see what he actually looks like. But the other half of me said, dude, you can't move. Whatever this is, isn't allowing you to move. So the other half of me, one side of me was thinking, my brain was saying, oh, I'm excited. And the other side was saying, dude, you're in trouble here, maybe. And I guess maybe whatever it was sensed that I was really kind of afraid. So I never actually got a good look at its face. And after about 10 or 15 seconds, it left. It just basically went back out through the front. And to this day, I can't remember whether I got up and told my dad right away or what. I just I have this blank in my memory. The one thing that was really weird, though, besides that, 6 hours later is 11:30 in the morning, and I was getting hungry, and my dad said, let's go down to Jack in the Box. So I reached in my right-hand side pocket of the pants I was wearing that night, and I pulled out the coins in my pocket, and all the coins, the standard American coins, they were all magnetized. I could pick up the coins with each other, and there were a couple nails I had, some 6-penny nails, and they were all magnetized. I could pick them all up with each other, and my dad could too, and we were saying, what the heck?
Yeah.
It's supposed to be impossible on purpose. They design coins that.
I've talked to people about that. I've tried to find out what will magnetize coins, and I haven't found an answer to that yet. And then the last night was where my dad was awakened in the middle of the night, and by this blue-white light that was filling the doorway of my room, and he was going to get up and take a look at, like, what the heck is going on? And a voice came in his head. This time, this was telepathic. Said, Jeffrey, just go back to sleep. Everything's fine. Nothing to see here. And he just went back to sleep. Mm-hmm. And at that point, then all the stuff, there was nothing else after that.
And we're both UFO witnesses. Steve saw 3 before I saw my first. And he's seen his 4th and 5th sightings were my first and second.
Okay.
And that's all I've seen is 2. When I first saw mine, it was kind of before that, I had seen nothing. I had no evidence of it. I just had Stephen's stories, and I was believing him 95, 98%, something like that. But until you really see it for yourself, I think you can't believe all the way. But then there it was one night. We were driving home late at night, looking up through the windshield. We saw a bright white light ahead of us in the sky. And I thought at first it was a plane coming into Palm Springs Airport. And but as I stared at it, I realized it didn't have any of those other blinky, flashy lights around. The landing lights, I suppose. Or running lights?
Running lights. Yeah.
Anyway, so it was just a white ball of light up in the sky, getting brighter and brighter. and then it shot away over the northern horizon and was gone so quickly. It was unbelievably fast. It streaked out into a line, and then the line collapsed behind it, all in less than a quarter of a second, I would say.
This is 2005.
Yeah. And it immediately took off at full speed. It didn't ramp up to that speed. It would have killed any pilot, a human pilot in that scenario wouldn't have survived it.
Yeah.
And when people ask me to guess how fast, it was about 20,000 miles an hour is my guess, at least. And then when we started doing our research after that, that's when we really began doing our real research, like we were going to start writing a book kind of research. And that was about 18 years ago. And it took a long time to kind of get our theories together and all our evidence and read everything on the subject that we could find,
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
My research really started more about like 1990. When I hit 30, I was getting tired of not having answers to the continuous things that kept on happening to me that were just not explainable by normal means. And I'd heard plenty of stories from other family members about strange things that had happened to them, to the Shaw line, to the Rowe line, to the Newman line, to people like in our even the Griffiths line that, from different people that some were visited by old Glegley, some hadn't been, but we had commonality of strangeness frequently associated with missing time and unexplainable phenomena.
Sure.
Yes, everyone in the family except Karen seems to have, his sister Karen seems to have this big chunks of missing time.
The missing time phenomenon. Yeah.
The missing time phenomenon.
Do you all think that, I don't mean to interrupt. Do you all think that certain families are targeted?
Yes, definitely. Most definitely.
Bloodlines.
In fact, we discovered that when we started really doing our research. We discovered that the abduction phenomenon, people were thinking that it was they were just taking a cross section of humanity. They just were after samples, and they were just, this is scientific interest maybe. But the phenomenon really is they find a bloodline that they like, the strain of DNA that matches their criteria, and then they prey on that family for years and generations. In fact, they'll take that one person again and again and again through their lives, and then later they'll start taking the children of that person and the children and their grandchildren. And it seems like Stephen's family may have been abduction victims for much longer than just his generation. We think it went back. And we think that maybe this old Glegley is actually one of these
things. Leslie, I want to point something out. You mentioned two things. You used the word victim, and then you used the word prey. So I'm assuming that means that you see these things as malevolent.
I do. First of all, kidnapping and sample taking against my will, let's say it happened to me. Yeah. That's abduction. That's a crime against me, right? Just right there, it's a crime. And also, it's so traumatizing. We think it traumatized poor Philip, his brother. He had a very unhappy life, and he never had what you'd call an emotionally stable or happy relationship with anyone, and he was kind of a miser and a hermit and became paranoid. And he ended up taking his own life and his mother's life at the same time. He shot her and then killed himself with a shotgun on his 51st birthday.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was horror. It was just absolutely horrible. And so we attribute the trauma and this loss right at their doorstep. We put it right at their doorstep as being a possible source for Philip's, trauma all through his life.
Philip was he wasn't unhappy all his life. I mean, when he was working as a draftsman, as an engineer, he had a lot of male friends and that kind of stuff. But he never had any long-term relationships, and he was just odd in many ways. He was odd, but he wasn't. He became, as he got a little older, definitely became more of a miser and
paranoid.
And he was a huge man. He was 6'3" and a half, about 350. Okay, and it was such a shame because after my father died unnecessarily from cancer in August 25th of
The
2017,
same, yeah, that he killed
my brother was taking care of my mother, who had 4th-stage arthritis and advanced Parkinson's. So my mom was a 24/7 responsibility for my brother. So,
but anyway, we do lay that at their doorstep, and also we know from our research that what they're doing with women is terrible.
yes.
They're impregnating them. So what happens is that they take a woman and they impregnate her, and then they put her back, and then 4 months later they take her again and steal the fetus, and then these women report sometimes years later being introduced to their taken again and introduced to their hybrid offspring. So this is, of course, another horrible trauma for these women. Sometimes it happens multiple times in their lives, too. One woman's case study I read, it happened to her 4 times. So she lost 4 of her babies just stolen away from her. This terrible
And
invasion.
she had ultrasounds done. A lot of these women, too, because, with science, and medicine evolving, a lot of these women have had ultrasounds and yes, you were pregnant. And it seems like always about this 5 centimeter size, about the size of a baseball. Then the babies just disappear and the whole placental cavity, everything is taken just like they were never pregnant in the first place.
What do the doctors say?
They've been like vacuumed out.
They have no explanation except for that we know you're pregnant. Now it looks like you were never pregnant.
Yeah, there was a documentary I saw on it. I believe we're talking about the same lady's case, and the doctors were completely stumped because it was like, yeah, you're pregnant. We did the ultrasound. There was a fetus there, and then boom, it's like nothing ever happened.
So it's some kind of like science experiment. I mean, but it's more than that because you're talking also about hybrids too.
Yes. And we one of the things that we discovered in our research was these things called the Dulce papers. There's this supposed base in New Mexico called the Dulce Air Force Base, and among ufologists, it's that's the name the ufologists give it. It's an underground secret base under the Archuleta Mesa, 7 levels deep. The top 5 levels are normal human personnel, and the bottom 2 levels are military/alien base. And there was a security guard who wasn't supposed to go down to the lower levels. He didn't have the security clearance for that level.
Yes.
But a few did, I assure you. But he did go down. He snuck down there. And what he saw were all these vats growing babies and hybrid alien and gray alien babies inside these vats. So now we know what they do with them. They finished gestating them in vats, and from the papers, that's the only time we know about that. Vats.
And it's interesting that the indigenous Indian people of the area, they've known about this Archuleta Mesa thing for hundreds, if not thousands, of years, and they call them their star brothers or star friends, and they've seen them, the UFOs coming out of the mesa opening up and lights coming out. And they, it's funny, the indigenous American Indians have a whole different viewpoint, like the Modocs around Mount Shasta. They have a different thing. They don't see them as being such threats as we do.
Interesting. Anastasi, right? Anastasi? Star people? Or ant people? Yeah.
Oh, the Anunnaki.
Those are the ant people of the Hopi.
Yeah. The
Anastasi. Yeah.
Yes. And the ant people, it's actually translates into Anu and Naki. So the Hopis, the actual translation for the ant people is Anunnaki.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Their language,
Those are from the stars came.
So I want to
the planet,
I want to definitely explore more about the Greys. I have a quick story for you about that shortly that I want to talk to you and get your impressions on, because I too have had experiences that match up or fall into that category of an alien contact encounter. It's definitely not a supernatural vision or some kind of spiritual thing. This was distinctly different. I've had both in my life, and this was very, very different from that. 3 encounters with UFOs and 2 with grays. But there was this, I can't remember his name. I've been trying to remember and I can't. He was, you'll probably know who it is. There's a gentleman. He was a high level military officer in, I believe, the Israeli, in the Israeli armed services. And he put out a report several years ago that said, and he wrote in a book, I guess, that there is a galactic federation.
Right. He was in the Ministry of Defense, I believe.
Ministry of
There
Defense.
was one in Canada and then one in Israel.
But I'm talking about the one in Israel.
Yeah.
And he was saying that there was that he knew that all the governments of the world know there's this galactic federation. Not to sound too sci-fi or Star Trek, but I mean that's how he described it, and that there are malevolent beings that want to, I guess, conquer this planet, take its resources or whatever, and then there are others that protect it, and that there's been agreements that have been made that in order, sort of like a type of treaty where they can have so many or so much genetic material that's been permitted in order to prevent an invasion. I don't know how much of this is true, and I'm not sure I'm remembering all of it correctly, or I might be mixing different stories in my head because it was quite a few years ago. But do you know anything about that?
Stephen does, because he went to Linda Moulton Howe's seminar at Contact in the
Her
Desert
disclosure
last year
seminar, which I heard a lot of dongs go off in my head. There were like 500 or 600 people there, and what she was talking about meeting with this guy for 7 hours on a boat somewhere off of in Washington, right? Somewhere around that area.
She said she met with a whistleblower who went out on a boat and secretly disclosed a great deal of information about how we were really. We were part of a galactic federation that the Earth has been being fought over for over 200 million years. Okay, that there are tall whites and there are Nordics and there are mantis people, feline people, and they all come from distant systems in all different directions.
And we've been so far. We've been on 4 different starships that were built, 2 that were named after 2 of the original guys on Majestic 12. So these beings supposedly have built these starships, and we've been tagging along since 2003. We've been to 26 different solar systems. Right. And we've been to planet Pisceon 3 and Pisceon 4 and Rigel 6 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And one of them is controlled by the tall whites. One is by the reptiloids. And we're just been tagging along on these intergalactic starships. And I was thinking, you know what? This sounds like what we want to hear about-ism. This is like
we all want to hear.
We all want to hear the captain.
Love to have it
we all
true,
want to
right?
hear the Captain Picard is real and that we're part of this federation. But it doesn't explain the cow mutilations. It doesn't explain how they've been around for so many thousands of years.
Right, and so we don't ascribe to that theory.
We do not.
We think what happened is if you want to leak fake information to the UFO community. There is no better person to leak it to than Linda Moulton Howe. She's like the first lady of the ufology community.
She really is.
She's she's the Jacqueline Onassis of our world.
Yeah.
And so if I wanted to leak false information to somebody and make sure it got to the entire UFO community, that's who I would leak it to. Of course, she herself can't testify truth or not truth. It was just something that she said was, leaked to her from this guy. But we found it very suspicious that 2 of the ships in this federation are named after Majestic 12. These are generals from the 1940s. Why are aliens naming their starships after our generals from the 1940s?
That was a big
seemed like
dong.
a joke to me.
Yeah, exactly. One planet is controlled by these tall basically cat people.
No, yeah, but we don't have to
You know,
go
it's like, you
down
know,
that rabbit hole.
we don't go down that rabbit.
So our theory instead
Thundercats
is
are
that,
real.
Thundercats are real. That's true.
That's awesome.
So our theory is a little different. We think that these beings that are flying the UFOs are our cousins that separated from us thousands of years ago because of the thing that caused the Great Flood. The Great Flood has pretty much been figured out what happened. 13,000 years ago, there was an extinction event. Mm-hmm. And these nanodiamonds, celestial diamonds, were found in the soil of 13,000 years ago, proving it was a celestial impact of some kind. Mm-hmm. And so we believe this is the source of the flood myths. There's really, Noah is just one of almost 1,200 separate flood myths. There's 1,200 Noah stories in different cultures all around the planet, obviously pointing to a shared event. Mm-hmm. What we think is that most of humanity lost our technology when this happened to us, and we were thrown back into the Stone Age. But we think some of the people on the planet at the time did not lose their technology. And they essentially escaped the cataclysm with their knowledge and technology intact. And they've been sharing the solar system with us all our lives because they really are cousins. They're brothers. They've mutated from us. They're quite different from us now. And they've mutated into, we think, different forms, right? Mm-hmm. But that's another thing with aliens. Why are they always bipedal hominids? Always. Even the insectoids, they're still bipedal hominids. Right. One head, two arms, two legs. This one person who was testifying to me about how he's having sex with a insectoid female.
That sounds like fun.
And he's been introduced to his
it wasn't
children,
a mantis.
his hybrid children. And I said, well, okay, so insectoid, are we talking about extra legs?
Right.
Or, he goes, no, it's a human skeleton. He says, essentially, skeletally speaking, they're the same as us.
Oh, okay.
They just have bigger heads and weird mandible looking things on their faces.
And, I always like to point out to people that there was forewarning in every one of these flood myths. There was forewarning and foreknowledge that there was going to be a cataclysm.
Yeah. They almost all have a warning.
So we had to have been at least advanced enough to be able to use very advanced telescopes and maybe satellite technology. And we had forewarning of probably a year or two that there was going to be a cataclysm. And
the celestial impact was big enough to where it would have caused an enormous tsunamis worldwide. And we believe that actually the human race was fairly technological before this happened 13,000 years ago.
Could that be the Atlantis connection? Is it related to this?
Atlantis.
Yes.
And we believe we like the theory that Atlantis is on up the coast of Spain in the Doñana nature bird sanctuary. Uh-huh. It's a big delta right near the Pillars of Hercules, right where Plato said it was supposed to be, right?
Right.
And they did some ground penetrating stuff in the middle of this swamp and found concentric rings underneath. And out in the ocean, out from the delta mouth, is a big debris field of cut stones. Looks exactly like what would happen if a wave filled your city and then dragged it back out into the ocean, And because the celestial impact was near Lake Superior at the time, the tsunamis in the North Atlantic would have been the worst. It only hit about 500 miles from the Labrador Sea. So the debris that would have been dumped into the ocean at the North Atlantic would have made anything on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean at like ground zero for Tsunamiville, So that if Atlantis was there, we know what happened to it.
So you don't think
dragged into the ocean,
You don't subscribe to the theory about Antarctica having shifted down to the South Pole and that being, Atlantis is under the ice there.
Actually, we do subscribe to the fact that it shifted. And that we think there may be a society living under the ice sheet, according to Admiral Byrd. We believe him. But we don't think it was Atlantis.
Okay.
Atlantis is supposed to be a city not a continent for one thing, and also it was supposed to be on an island, but the island had bridges to the mainland, so it would have had to been really close to the mainland.
I mean, that would have made it smaller
bridges, right?
than Antarctica is for sure.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And it was a city-state. Back then, they described city-states, so it wasn't just a big city there. The whole region around it would have supported the city, would have had farm and, rural communities out there.
There was a galleon that was found, an ancient galleon that was found off the coast. I don't know if it was Portuguese or whatever. It was very, very close to where we think Atlantis was. And they found orichalcum, bars of orichalcum, which also was talked about, which was this prized metal, which is mostly zinc.
Mostly an Atlantean.
Mostly zinc and copper. Mostly zinc and copper with a couple other elements there, but it was a prized metal that was prized by the Atlanteans. And that was just found, I think, only 10 or 15 years ago in a wreck that was off the coast. So
I think I heard about that. That's fascinating. Hold that thought right there. We're going to take our next break, I guess, before we get to the third hour, where we'll start taking questions from the audience. Fascinating stuff. And when we come back here, I want to share with our guests my own personal experience with the Greys and get their opinion on this, since they certainly have a family history of knowing more about it than probably I do. We'll be back after this.
nothing. Sinking deep, no ecstasy. Reality haunts the living mind. If I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realize. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, taking off without the same mistake. Darling, where you going? Won't be as simple for you. Time won't change anything if I don't know how to breathe. The good and bad pushed against the tide. Maybe once, maybe twice. Turned around to save the time. Now I know how to leave the side. If I saw another day, only to scream into the night. Nothing ever tries to change, even if I want to realize. 'Cause I've been sitting here, same old ways, taking off without the same mistake. Can I leave it all behind? Follow all the leading signs. When the dark is growing and the light is closing in, darling, where you going? Won't be as simple for you.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been having a fantastic discussion tonight about aliens and UFOs with our brand new special guests, Leslie and Stephen Shaw. I think you're going to find the next hour even more interesting, because now we're going to be taking your questions and more from the panel and everything else. If you've got anything that you would like to ask or contribute to the discussion, call into the show at 718-362-6380. That's 718-362-6380. Remember to enter PIN number 855-4111 when prompted to be put into the queue. International callers can dial free on Skype. Just dial Eye of the Seer and we'll bring you on as well. I know most of you, though, always prefer the chat. That's fine. The chat is unintrusive, I guess. And you can always leave us questions anywhere on all of the platforms, whether you're watching on Twitter or X, I guess they call it today, right? Facebook, Twitch, Spreaker, or YouTube, you name it, Instagram. We'll bring it on the air. If it's a good question, you might get it answered, okay? We'll be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Father Chris and Brandon Milan are back joining us, and we are now going to, I'm going to ask our guests a little bit about my own personal experience. So, Stephen and Leslie, I've had experiences growing up, strange ones, not necessarily alien, but I've been no stranger to paranormal or what you might call mystical experiences, but a few of them fall into clearly the alien category. And I'm not sure I would have really had an opinion on it until I had these very specific encounters that led to it changed worldview in a lot of ways. I've seen the things in the sky, you know. I mean, I told a story to the audience while we were trying to get connected to you about when I was 4 years old. There was this large craft following us home from a movie. I was asleep in the back seat, but my parents saw. They pulled over, and my dad said it was so close he could throw a rock at it. He says it was the size of a football field. Later on, when I was a teenager, I was driving home from Cape Cod in Massachusetts towards Rhode Island, and it was a nice big puffy cumulus clouds, nice sunny day, and there was this white half moon shaped but more disc like that would just jump between the clouds back and forth, these very fast swoops back between all the clouds, and it followed me all the way home. There was also, when I lived out in Las Vegas, lights that I saw in the skies over Sedona. We went to Sedona for a weekend, and there was very strange things that were in the sky over Sedona. But in Vegas, it's a hot spot, definitely, with the vortices out there. But when I lived in Vegas, that was when I had my first encounter with what I think would be considered classic grays. So let me briefly tell you what this was like, and I'd like your opinion on the grays, because this is the part that fascinates me the most, I think, because I had this experience. Otherwise, I probably would be indifferent to it. But right now, you know, it's something that's so memorable to me that I can't help but want to know more about it. So essentially, I was very much into meditating back then. I was a Buddhist at this point, practicing Tibetan Buddhism, actually Vajrayana, and I was doing meditation. Then I, for some reason, I was exceptionally tired that day, and I felt I'm not going to be able to meditate effectively. I'm just too tired, so I think I'm just going to go take a nap instead. So I got up and from my meditation mat area and went and lied down. It was my day off, and my wife was at work, so I just, I rested probably about 3 p.m, drew the shades nice and dark. And so I lay down, and I just could not get to sleep no matter what I tried to do, even though I was exhausted. I couldn't explain this. So I looked up and just was staring at the sky, and I mean the ceiling rather, and I'm just looking at it and closing my eyes and looking at it and closing my eyes. And one of the times that I did this, I opened my eyes, and there was the classic gray, slender, extremely tall, the big eyes, looking down at me. He was just right on the side of my bed, looking down right in my face. Little, 2 little dots for a nose and a sliver mouth. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel, I could move. I didn't move, but I could move. And I just looked at him, and I thought, for a moment, it felt completely natural. And then suddenly something changed, and I said, wait a second, this can't be real. And so I closed my eyes again and opened them, and it was gone. So I sat up and looked around, and I thought, well, I was just meditating. Maybe this was just some kind of hallucination or a waking dream that sort of happened, a daydream kind of thing, because I was in that maybe I was in that halfway state between sleep. So that's how I justified it. And I would have left it at that until a few months later, when I moved back from Las Vegas to Georgia. I was sleeping in the guest room at my in-laws' house. We had just moved back. We were trying to find a new place to live. And I was staying there, my wife, and she was reading a book and had fallen asleep while I was sort of just watching TV and dozing. And so the TV was on, and she was reading, and then she eventually dozed and fell asleep with the book. And I reached over and I shut the light off, and I just laid there continuing to watch TV. Was not sleeping. Absolutely was not sleeping. Not even dozing this time. At this point, I had woken because I had got up and I turned the light off. I was sort of reawoken, and so I was just watching TV. And then I noticed there was movement in the corner of the room, and it was dark because the light was off now, and it was just the light from the TV shining, and it was a relatively small TV, so it didn't cast much light. And I noticed in the corner there was like movement, and I thought, what the hell is that over there? And we had 2 cats. They were with us, and they were out cold on the bed with my wife. We were all on there. I was the only one awake. So I then sat up because it was like I could tell there was something moving in that corner. And so I adjusted my glasses to look more closely at it, and I noticed that there were 2 long, slender grays in the corner, and they were just looking at me. So the next thing I remembered was I was then now laying down, and it was again looking over me in exactly the same way as it was before. And what was really interesting this time is that when I closed my eyes, I could still see its face, whether my eyes were open or closed. And so at this point, I start moving Tracy. I said, I need you to look at this. I need you to see this. The cats would not wake up. My wife would not wake up. Nothing, no movement. They were like dead, but they weren't. I mean, they were fine, but I couldn't wake them. And the whole time it's just staring there, and I'm staring at it. So I sat up, and it was just there in front of me. And then the next thing I knew, I was laying back down again, and I looked into the corner, and they just sort of faded back into that corner as if they were never there. They just went right through the wall or into the darkness.
The wall, yeah. We hear a lot of reports about moving in and out of rooms through walls. We think they can negate matter temporarily and pass through it.
Interesting.
And we think that a lot of people mistake that for portal travel because it must appear like a portal from the inside,
Right.
But I think because they come through. We've heard reports that like a mountain, a hole will open up in the side of a mountain, and UFOs will fly in and out of it. The Archuleta Mesa has had the same thing, where a hole opens up and all this light spills out of it, and UFOs fly in and out of it. And then suddenly the mountain seals back up. And, it happens with, people being taken a lot. And that's very common, where people will be abducted and right next to their sleeping spouse, who never wake up during the procedure. Does it happen? Do you have other family members that have any experiences like this too?
I don't have anyone that's ever told me that they've had an encounter like that. I have several that were either obsessed with or saw UFOs, but no one ever came to me and said that they saw a gray or had like grays in their bedroom like that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a quick question. Were you living a fairly pure life at that time? You're like, so you're a Tibetan Buddhist, and I mean, as far as like, were you drinking or taking medications or anything like that?
No medications. I've always consumed, very moderate amounts of alcohol, but too. Not, no prescriptions. I try to stay off of prescriptions.
Yeah. The most important things that have happened to me in my life, and some that we haven't even touched upon yet, they happened when I was at the peak of my physical health. I was almost drinking nothing. And I was doing Tai Chi every day. I ran long distances. I was in the military. I was eating good food, but I was working out, and I was very, very chaste at that time in my life. Mm-hmm. And so it was. I do believe, from what I've been able to hear from other people too, is that it is a certain thing to do with the frequency of our brain waves, whether we're like in a 2 to 4 cycle per second of brain waves, or like right now we're in about 40 cycles per second because we're on a monitor. So we're in the beta, the beta state. But when you get into the deeper states, like you get into meditation, like thetas and the alpha states, then you become more open to, like, I call them different channels. Like right now, let's say we're listening to 97.1, but if you have like the ability, or you train, you can listen to multiple different frequencies. And literally, I think that part of the interest that they have in us is when we can actually make contact, because we're actually a little closer to them, mm-hmm. as far as like the way they think and the way what's important to them.
Yes, there is a spiritual connection.
There is a spiritual connection, I believe.
Too.
Yes.
Stephen and we also did about 2 years of astral projection work and meditation work and chanting work and chakra opening work. And the astral realm for me was fun. It was fun to go traveling around in it, and I had no problems with it. But it seemed with Stephen that whenever he would go become astral, that he would be harassed. It's almost like they're watching him on a spiritual level as well, just on the other side of the veil. And my research is looking now at what happens after. I think at a certain point become a certain age, they stop taking you physically. They're not interested in your sperm or your eggs anymore. Mm-hmm. They're more interested in, but they continue to influence. They continue to have a spiritual connection with those they have taken in the past, I believe. And it seems like Stephen is still being contacted to this day. Mm-hmm. He'll enter the hypnagogic state, that sleep state between fully asleep and fully awake.
Yes.
Where
you get the feeling of falling and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. You sometimes you're paralyzed. You can't, and some people are afraid of that state there because they can't move. They're paralyzed feeling, but it's actually a state of power. That's when you can actually separate from your body and become astral and go do astral traveling. And for me, it was always a fun exercise. But for Stephen, it was never. He would have persecution, feelings of suffocation.
Well, I used to be able to do it. I read a book by Harry Lorraine, The Art of Astral Projection, and it was very, very simple actually to do it. You just have to get your body relaxed enough, and you just basically focus on your breathing. you do a 3 inhale through the nose and then a 5 exhale through the mouth, and then you do a 5 inhale and then a 3 exhale, and then you can work on the chakras, like spinning the chakras, like from the first chakra, which is the red color, all the way up to like the 7th chakra, which is like a whitish color.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can, and actually when I did that the very first time, I came out of my body when I was like 17. And it was again, kind of like what you were describing. I was really tired. It was during the afternoon on a Sunday, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was living at my parents' house, and my sister and brother were there. And I was reading the Silmarillion by Tolkien, which is kind of a boring book. So I got bored, and then I put it down. I thought, well, maybe I'll practice this. I felt really tired, so maybe I can get into that state. So I did. I got into that state, and I woke up, and I thought to myself right away, oh, I feel like I'm glued to the bed. And I said, oh, I can pop out of my body now. And I just popped right out of my body, right up to the ceiling fan. And I got really excited. I thought, oh, great, I'm going to float down. I'm going to go into the living room and spy on my parents and tell them what they were doing and saying, and I'm going to prove to them that I did astral projection. I was 17 years old.
Sure.
I was thinking those kind of thoughts. So I start floating down the hallway feet first, and I decide, well, maybe I should turn around and look at my body. And I start to come down with my feet, and then I get this weird kind of vibrating sensation, and then I feel myself being pulled back. I call it like being pulled back through thick mud, slowly back into my body, and then I slam back into my body. and then for about a day, I felt like I felt a little bit sick, like I didn't quite get fully connected back, or I wasn't ready for it.
Arms were coming out of your body.
Oh, I've done that with Tai Chi.
Sometimes,
Did that with Tai Chi many times. Tai Chi and Bagua, yeah. That was easy. I had a lot of my experiences with Tai Chi is also a really good tool because it does slow down your brain waves, and
sure,
you have to really move I was a state licensed acupuncturist in California here for 20 years, and studied other forms of martial arts too. So that a lot of that stuff became part of my life. I was been really mostly a Taoist for most of my life, and then became a Tibetan Buddhist for a little while with Leslie. But I've always gravitated more towards Taoism, but again, the Eastern.
Sure.
We're not masters of it or anything, but more dabblers. I started hearing into the astral realm. It's called clairaudience. And after several years of doing this work, and that kind of creeped me out after we gave it up. I gave up the practice then after that. And slowly for me, the ability to astral project faded away.
Yeah.
But for Stephen, it never did disappear at all.
I've had clairaudience my whole life.
Yeah. And he's been kind of like harassed, like I say, by these beings on the other side. As soon as he falls asleep or is about to fall asleep, you'll hear these loud bang, bang, bang on the wall next to him, shock him out of awake.
Well, sometimes it'll be the 3. It's always in 3.
Yeah.
There'll be 3 knocks right behind my head, or it'll be the closing of a door, like somebody slammed the door, my bedroom door, or like a plate glass was just broken. And then sometimes it's the sound of a musical instrument, which is really nice. But
I've had the musical
you know,
instrument one.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of clairaudient experiences with that in that state.
Yes.
Very interesting that I've told this to the audience before. I have never been trained in any kind of musical instrument. I didn't have the patience for it as a child. So any opportunities I had, I passed by. Sadly, I regret those moments, but never had any training, no knowledge of it at all. But there was one time where I had an out-of-body experience, and in that moment, I had perfect knowledge of music. It all made sense. All musical theory. I could compose instantaneously a symphony at a master level, and when I came out of it, ironically, that same day, and I did not realize I could do this. But when I came out of it that day, I had accompanied a friend who he was a curator at a museum, and we were going to dinner, and we had to stop at his office. And in the main part of the museum was a grand piano, and for some reason, I just felt compelled after this experience to go and sit down at the grand piano. And in that moment, I sat down, and I instantly could play like a master pianist. And then suddenly, I became aware of what I was doing, and then I couldn't do it anymore. And
still in the zone.
Yeah, it was like
tapped into the Akashic records.
Yes, yes, Exactly.
Yeah.
I would I could talk to you about my experiences and yours for like hours and hours, but I want to give a chance to our audience because there's all these questions coming in. So, Father Chris, let's start with you. What questions have you seen that might be good ones for our guests tonight?
Yeah, I was just updating the one that I was going to put forward. So, not sure said, would a hybrid? So this is referring back to the
breeding
accounts
program.
of yeah. The question was, would a hybrid have a soul? Are aliens possibly what were called angels in the past? Could they possibly have been a form of elemental?
Me or you, dear?
I guess I'll take that one. There's debate within the community in a like, for instance, like the Greys, are they actually really mutated humans over the past 13,000 years, or are they partly genetically modified by the Nordics that we believe are the ones that are really in charge of stuff that live inside the earth in cities?
And
so
the Nordics,
whether they have souls, it seems like that they don't really necessarily do, because they were so devoid of emotion. And most people's descriptions, they seem to be very devoid of emotion. So that is one that I can't really,
we think the Greys may be a slave race being bred by the Nordics. We think the Nordics, which by the way are indistinguishable from human beings, they look like tall Swedes. We think the Nordics may be the ones kind of in charge of this whole setup, and that the gray aliens are kind of bred tools or genetically created tools. We think created from human DNA, because that's why they look like humans, right? We have more in common physically with gray aliens than we do with any other creature on the planet. When you think about it, our closest relative is the bonobo chimp, right? But we're nothing like them, except but the gray aliens move like us. And if they're moving just like we do, then that means they have the same skeletal structure and the same musculature. When I look at a gray alien, I see a human being that's been underground for 13,000 years, has been bred underground for 13,000 years. Their eyes are larger, like it's been darker, right? They're grayer, they're paler. They don't need hair any longer because they're underground or in space. We think a lot of the separation of our race, some people escaped into space and some people escaped underground. And we don't know the exact hierarchy, but we think that the Greys, because they're completely, they're automatons. Whenever people, and everyone describes them this way, all abductees, they're completely emotionless. And sometimes they're causing great pain to the abductees, but they don't care. They don't, doesn't bother them at all that they're causing this agony. And then they never question what to do next. They always know precisely what they're doing. They're very goal driven. They never wonder what are we supposed to do now. They always know exactly what they're supposed to do next. And they never show any emotion at all. So we believe that at some point, they may have been created as a slave race. And we think we ourselves perhaps have been slaves to these.
And humans make notoriously bad slaves.
But we make very poor slaves. Yes.
That's very true. Too individualistic
We're too
for that.
And tend to fight the yoke, with all we can. But for thousands of years, these creatures have been with us, and so we stopped looking at them as far as aliens coming from distant star systems, rather than people. These are creatures that have been with us for thousands of years. They must live closer, and they're seen
also
10,000 times a year.
We watch their actions always speak louder than words.
Yes.
Anyways, too. So.
And the way they're acting about our military.
You want to ask another question?
Yeah, let's hold those thoughts because I want to come back to some of them if we have time, but I don't want to ignore the audience either. Brandon, what's our next one?
Yes, the next question is from Lucille. How do you feel about aliens being termed skinwalkers? Been hearing a lot about that.
Well, that question was for us. I'm sorry.
Yes.
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 That was another difficult one too. Mostly skinwalkers seem to be correlated with Native Americans almost all the time, like
Yes.
the medicine men or healers or medicine men that have gone awry or gone down the dark path. Now, again, we can't really comment. I can't really comment on that because I have never seen a skinwalker or met a person that's seen a skinwalker.
They remind me of the vampire mythos, though, how they're
Yes.
shapeshifters. Like
Vampires are shapeshifters too. So and the werewolves, of course. So yes, there is something there for sure.
Yeah, I
Whether
have a
they're
theory it's-
aliens, I'm not sure about.
Yeah,
that.
I think they're more of an interdimensional creature, kind of like Sasquatch, possibly.
Jamie,
Possibly,
what's our next one? You have one over there?
Tiffany had one way back, and it goes along with the hybrid theory. She was asking about what your thoughts were on the Rh negative alien hybrid theory. She's been having some
Yes.
pretty lucid dreams lately about her being involved as a scientist working alongside of them. She's talked
Yes,
about those
we-
dreams in the chat.
We have discovered that the criteria that they seem to be wanting in their genetic and the people they prey on. Abductees, I believe 4 out of 10 are Rh negative, and that's a rather high percentage. So it is a higher percentage than certainly the representative in the population.
and green eyes.
Yes, and green eyes seem to be a high and that's a mutation in humans. It's not a natural. It is a mutation in us. That's why it's rather rare. And the Basque population tends to be higher Rh negative than the rest of us Caucasians, but so consequently, Basque people are taken in higher proportion, whether they're after the Basque specifically, and that's putting the Rh factor numbers up, or they're after the Rh factor numbers, and that's putting the Basque population up. We definitely see some bizarre stuff with the abduction phenomenon. It also is almost entirely a Caucasian phenomenon.
It's very high.
Really?
It's much higher than
About
yes.
9 and 10, a little higher than that, actually.
That's fascinating.
Abductees are Caucasian. So that's another thing that makes no sense for a distant alien race coming here and suddenly wanting tons of Caucasian DNA. Even though we only make up 18% of the population, we make up 95% of the abduction phenomenon. So obviously
Wow.
they're after Caucasian DNA primarily. For what? Why? And we started looking at the whys. And one of the things we think is that we know about this hybrid breeding program, and we think it may be that they're trying to reintegrate with us or infiltrate us. And we think it's because they're trying to get us to denuclearize. They're terrified of our nukes. They've proven it with all of their actions. They're all through the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, UFOs were reported around all our nuclear bases, our nuclear research facilities. They actually tampered with a couple of our nuclear facilities, shutting down all at the
silos,
Malmstrom
yeah.
incident in Montana. They actually shut down all the warheads. A UFO was floating outside the gate, shutting down all the warheads. And we believe that because they live here with us and are sharing the planet with us, this is why they're terrified of our reckless use of nuclear weapons. And it's not because they're just sort of worried about that species on that planet far away. We sort of care about them. We're a little worried. They're acting like they have skin in the game, like they are worried about us destroying the planet and killing them as well. So this is why they're dogging our military. Everywhere our military goes, the pilots are reporting these things following them.
That's one of the things that came out during the hearings over the summer last year.
Last summer, the pilots. Did you see those hearings? They were really interesting. The intelligence officer Gresh and 2 pilots, and both pilots were saying, and this was news to me. I didn't realize it was every time. They said every single time our military goes out on maneuvers all around the world, these things are with us, following us.
Yeah.
So to me, it looks like it's obvious they're keeping tabs on our nukes, worried that we're going to blow up the whole world.
Yes. So you have more questions, I'm sure.
Oh, there's so many. In fact, you are like you guys tonight. This show is breaking all of our previous records for live listenership. We typically,
Hi, everybody.
It's amazing. I mean, we are
20 live.
We're getting about 4 times the normal amount of live viewers, and usually our major audience is on demand. So this is really fantastic. I mean, they love you out there. So what's our, I guess, Father Chris, what's our next one?
Well, I wanted to mention that Jamie's dad is in the chat.
Yeah,
and so,
my dad's a Star Trek
Bill's-
fan, so
Okay.
Are we all?
he does.
I've not met you, Bill, but
Bill.
I'd like to meet you. You sound like a good guy. And he put, "Who are they? Are they us from the future?" But more importantly, saying they're all God's creations. That's his belief. So
Right.
I guess because I guess one of the things that when atheists are really desperate, they throw at me, "Oh, what about life on other planets?" You know.
What about it?
As a Christian, I go, "Yeah, so what?"
Yeah.
Yeah, we believe that God creates life, so yeah.
Well, wouldn't there be anything else
Yeah.
out there, right?
But my dad goes on to say, he harkens back to the Prime Directive to a certain extent. Maybe they're just preparing us for the future.
Well, that's definitely one of the
They're
theories I've
visiting
heard.
us. Yeah.
Because I mean, I've always wondered if that whole galactic federation
Right.
thing is true. Could it be that, that the world is protected? I mean, I would have thought that we would have blown ourselves up by now, but somehow we've managed to still be here. So I wonder sometimes if there isn't something that's suppressing.
We've come pretty darn close
We
a few
do.
times.
Several
And,
times.
There's
And-
always been like the 11th hour Hail Mary, and
Yeah.
we seem to luck out.
Yeah. So it makes me
you have to
wonder.
wonder.
And when did all this really start? When you look at it, it was like you had Roswell, right?
47.
And then
Well, the Foo Fighters.
yeah,
in
during World War
II.
Yes.
Would have been the first inkling of it. And again, they're following our military.
but then again, World War II is when we first used the A bomb. So
The bombs.
yeah.
Yes.
And then it seemed
then
like
there
our
was a
technology
Roswell-
exploded after that.
Then there was a Roswell
Yes, that's true.
incident in 1941 in Missouri with Cape
Girardeau?
or Port Giardeau, Cape Giardeau, something. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It was in 1941, and in that case, the military got a crashed UFO ship and dead biologics. And in that case, they didn't accidentally release a newspaper article saying that a crashed ship had happened. So the military was able to cover that one up very quickly and very
And also,
precisely, yeah.
also lesser known was the 1933 crash in Italy that Mussolini was involved with. That was the
Yes.
first, to my knowledge, as far as a crash.
And then there's another credible crash in Kingman, Arizona. There's actually something like 20 crashes worldwide over the.
Do you think
Russia.
our computer technology, virtual reality, all of this stuff that seems to be exploding, do you think this is reverse engineered content
Yes,
material?
the microchip is supposed to be a reverse engineered.
I think part of it is. I think part of it was actually given to us as an exchange
yeah.
for genetic material in exchange for like some little drips and drabs of tech.
So a deal was made.
Yes, we
Yes.
do believe so.
Yes.
Eisenhower is supposed to have met with the Nordics. This is why we think the Nordics are in charge, first of all. Also, remember, we're thinking that these are cousins to ourselves. So they're essentially humans, but they're more advanced than we are in almost every way. We think of them, too, they may be part of the Adamic race. So they may have lifespans more like Noah and Methuselah and Enoch, in the 900 to 1,000 year lifespans. So we think they might be more spiritually advanced than we are, certainly more technically advanced than we are. And we think they use genetic modification just like we use any tool that we need. For
So they
instance,
probably
if
don't see this as a violation. They see this as a right, perhaps, that they have to it.
Exactly. It's like a
Yes.
birthright to them. And we think if they need if they need reptiloids, they breed reptiloids. If they need insectoids, they breed insectoids. If they need gray aliens to do their busy work, their go out and collect samples from people work.
Or go, like sanguinate a couple of cows and
Yes.
their genital organs.
That's another thing pointing to the fact that they are living here with us is these constant cow mutilations over decades and decades and decades.
Yeah.
We think that it's possible that they have kept herds of their own that are not viable any longer, being kept underground, and possibly need regular infusions of surface DNA, not just for their people, but possibly for their animals as well.
It's every domesticated. It's the goats. There's goat
Yes.
mutilations.
It's almost entirely domestic
Horses,
animals.
almost always
Ruminants.
domestic animals.
At the beginning of the show, you had mentioned that you had some thoughts on why this is being suppressed, or you had something that you wanted to say about the government suppression, or why they backtrack. They'll let something out, then they backtrack. What was that? I wanted to get back to it.
Yeah, my feeling on that is that we get back to the whole issue as far as just watch the reactions and not their words. In other words, if actions always speak louder than words. And when you think about it, we're still dealing with the 7 deadly sins. The greed, gluttony, lust, vanity, pride, wrath, and sloth. Mm-hmm. And perhaps maybe they've got a little bit more of that under control than we have. We definitely believe that they have. That they haven't atrophied their ability to have telepathy and maybe empathy. But by the same token, we would not want to just all of a sudden let out that, our cousins have been living under our feet for 13,000 years. They're more advanced than us. It would crash all the stock markets. It would send people into panic. It would cause all kinds of controversy in religions. It would be literally like a disaster. So I think actually we asked for hey, we'll keep your secret, but we want something in exchange for keeping your secret. The
meetings with Eisenhower supposedly were their primary goal, the aliens, was to get us to denuclearize, and they did not get what they wanted. And so that has led to this kind of 60, 70 years of them dogging our military and keeping tabs on our military. But they are keeping their secret. They're keeping their secret, and we don't know which one of them wants to keep it. There's a rumor going around in the UFO community that it was actually us that wanted to keep this whole phenomenon secret, and because we didn't believe our people could handle it. Because of what the World War of the Worlds, rather, kind of proved that
that big panic.
We are a xenophobic, scared bunch,
Yeah, we're xenophobic as a.
Do you think that's still true today, though, with the fact that we've sort of been conditioned through decades of shows like Star Trek, Star Wars, where
I think it's definitely less so, and I think that is part of the part of the whole agenda.
You're trying to make it more palatable for us so that we're not, when disclosure finally does happen, however it does happen in the future, we won't go bonkers and insane and,
Yeah. Do you think that,
better,
do you expect to see it in your lifetime?
I don't know. One of this rumors that we've been hearing is that it was us that wanted to keep it secret, but there was supposed to be a deadline set for when disclosure would happen. This was supposed to be agreed upon. And supposedly we're overdue. And we think that is why they're starting to show themselves in such obvious ways. We think that's what crop circles are, is they're trying to message us. We think that's why they did a slow flyover of Phoenix. And that Phoenix Lights incident, that was the entire state. It started in Nevada and then crossed the entire state of Arizona nice and slow so that everybody can see it.
Yeah.
And then it flew into Mexico. So it's not like they're trying to hide anymore.
And they're certainly not shooting lasers down, blowing up the White House like Independence Day. It's not... It's not aggressive in that sense. I mean, the abduction phenomenon is disturbing, I would imagine, but at the same time, everything else about it doesn't seem as malevolent, or it doesn't seem like it's aggressive in any particular way.
Well, we think sometimes they don't put people back.
Okay. So you think that's where a lot of missing people go?
Keeping them.
Well, I mean, okay. Jamie Wolf was a police officer for many years, and she'll tell you that there are so many cases of abducted children where nobody knows anything about. They just disappeared off the face of the earth. I mean, all ages.
A lot of it can be attributed to human trafficking, but not all of it.
So it makes me wonder.
People disappearing in the wilderness, like up in Alaska, the Alaskan Triangle.
Yeah,
they've got
16,000 missing Alaskans. Yeah,
right, and they never show back up. They don't even find a hiking boot or anything.
So that's what I was going to ask: is do you feel that
Yeah.
some of this, some of the child abductions or the sheer volume of them, which is a lot larger in number than people even realize, isn't sexual predators as much as it's this?
Yes, in fact, there's an author who just came out with a book over at least a generation over a decade, where he was, finding out just how many people have disappeared, especially recently in our national parks, and it's astonishingly a lot higher than you'd think.
Right.
And of course,
Destination
some of them are
411?
serial killer victims. Yeah, we know that.
They're not all serial killers.
But
No.
they can't all be that.
They
Right.
can't all be
Too bad
fair,
of them,
but,
yeah.
so.
So we think sometimes they take people and put them back, and we surmise that sometimes they take people and don't put them back. It kind of depends what they need them for, right?
What do you think they do with them? Do you think they take them to their other world? Do you think that they dissect them? What are your thoughts?
We hear stories of dissection,
Really?
and, experimentation.
Well,
yes.
again, we're not talking about them going off planet particularly. We're talking
No,
about
it's here.
Right here.
We call them intraterrestrials.
Right.
That's
Interesting.
what our name for them is. That they, they may very well have, a base on, a occupation of the dark side of the moon, and maybe
Yeah.
even on Mars. I mean,
We think that they do have some limited stretch out into our solar system that way. We think, for instance, there's been structures found on Mars, structures seen on the dark side of the moon. There was a structure discovered on Phobos, one of Mars's moons. We think that prior to the comet impact of 13,000 years ago, we think that we were actually slightly more advanced than we are now. We think we had a space program, and we were flying to Mars. We think we had bases set up on Mars, bases set up on the moon, and then this comet took them by surprise enough to where they couldn't knock it out of trajectory. And so, but they had enough warning because everyone on these flood myths has, it sounds like they have enough time to build an ark or dig underground
like Darren Kuyu in Turkey,
or build underground cities, like there in Turkey, as Stephen was saying. So they had forewarning, which points to very advanced astronomy. To be able to spot a comet coming a year in advance, you have to have pretty good
a year
astronomy.
or two, whatever it was. Yes.
Yeah. So we think that they were advanced enough that some of them escaped into space. And who saw Deep Impact? The movie Deep Impact?
I did.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that one.
Everyone loves it, right? So we think they were looking at the same scenario. They're looking at a killer asteroid or comet, rather, coming to cause an extinction level event on the planet. How do you survive it? You do what Plan B was in the movie, which was to sink these underground arcs deep underground.
What do you
Putting
think?
the flower of humanity and all our technology down there with us.
You just made me think of my favorite movie, Knowing. Did you see Knowing?
Oh, I haven't seen.
Oh yeah, the one.
Haven't
Yes,
seen-
I know what you're talking about. The one with the guy who
Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage. Yeah.
That
that one.
that is one of my favorite movies, and it really is a
Yeah, if
type
y'all
of.
haven't seen it, that's good homework.
It's a type of apocalyptic, but
Yeah.
it's also very
I've seen
spiritual.
it.
They're kind of the
seen it.
Nordics in that one, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. And they're benevolent. And it's almost like a Genesis story, really, in a lot of ways. They have a lot of Adam and Eve imagery at the end, as you might recall. So it has both spiritual components as well as science, sci-fi ones. But I guess my final question to you, and then I want to give you a couple minutes. We got about maybe 5 minutes here. I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts on how this affects or influences religion?
Wow, that's a very broad question. Again, it depends on, I think, partly how they will eventually reveal themselves to us. Mm-hmm. And, if they are, let's say, for argument's sake, that they are the Nordics, okay, which they're tall, white, long-lived cousins of us. And again, being white, that would just raise some questions right there. The white man's in charge again. So in some religions, it would be, oh, here we go again. The whites are still in charge. Yeah. So as far as affecting religions, the Buddhists would see it much different than born again Christian.
Sure.
So it's a big question. That's an open question.
Yeah.
We know that, of course, that God is the maker of everything in the entire universe and stuff. But what we see in our past, like the pantheon of Egypt, for instance, or the pantheon of Greece,
or Sumeria,
the 12 gods, it's always 12, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think that it's possible that these cousins of ours have been playing God to our primitive brothers and sisters after the Great Flood. After the Great Flood, most of the stories talk about us becoming savages. We started to devolve into cannibals and just barbarism, complete barbarism, right?
Sure.
And most of these flood myths have a story at the end where God comes back to the people and teaches them civilization again, brings back mathematics and how to grow crops and how to animal husbandry and architecture. And almost all of these flood myths end the same way. God came and we were barbarians and he brought us back out of barbarism. So we think that they've been playing God. They kind of took pity on us at some point, right? When we're just devolving into a bunch of tribes of cannibals. They took pity on us and represented themselves as gods to just make it easier to bring us back out of the darkness.
Also, really quickly, genetically, one of the beauties of with genetics, that we know that about 13,000 years ago that the human race was reduced to about 10,000 individuals. So there was a genetic bottleneck. So the Viracochas came, and the Quetzalcoatl's and the Huangdis in China, the teachers, the Horomazdas, and they just showed up and they said, "Okay, no, you can't be cannibals. No, you got to be civilized." So,
so religions that are based on these pantheons, of gods that came and taught people, we think that these are false gods. They aren't real God. You know what I mean?
Right.
But a lot of religions, unfortunately, have a lot of basis in the stories coming out of these societies. So it kind of it's hard on Christianity from looking at it from our point of view. Because,
I would think we got to continue this. We need to do a part 2 at some point. If you're willing, I would love to have Brandon reach out to you and let's get you set up as soon as we have the schedule for next season, or maybe even during the summer. It would be fantastic to do a part 2 because we're out of time. But I want to give you about a minute to just talk about where people can find you, contact you, any events you're doing, your book, everything.
You. Well, we were tried to get a contact in the desert this year, but they're not having outside authors this year. We were there last year, so we're just going to attend.
Our book is who they are and what they're up to, and it's available on Amazon in softcover version, also Kindle and ebook, and we're also available on Ingram too. But that is basically
mostly bookstores use Ingram.
Bookstores use Ingram.
But we're on both, and we also have a very active Instagram page we're trying to get going with. If people are interested in hearing more about Stephen's bizarre family experiences, I've been posting his all his family experience. I've got about 25 different little stories of the different things that happened to his family, bizarre things that have happened to his family.
It's at leslie.shaw.author.
Yeah, and also we're also on Facebook at the same handle. And we do have a website. It's whotheyarebook.com. And you can find blogs there and also some excerpts and links to all our podcasts that we've done, including this one. When we get the link, we'll have it there.
Leslie and
Thanks so
Stephen,
much for
thank
coming
you
on.
so much. It's been such a great time, and I can't
Fascinating
wait to
stuff.
have you
Yeah.
back on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
God bless.
Father Chris, thank you.
everybody.
Brandon, thank you. And Jamie, thank you. We will be
you.
back next week to do open lines, open topics. And we can actually probably digest some of this and maybe talk about it and whatever else
Might
might
be
be
good
on your
debriefing.
mind. Good debriefing, yes. Anyway, until then, I will see you out there in the ether. God bless. Take care, everybody.
God bless everybody.